Bessie Calloway stood in that courtroom, hands shaking, watching a judge decide whether she deserved to be called mother. 30 days. That's what he gave her. 30 days to prove she could provide, could survive, could be enough. She had no money, no home, no plan, just 4 frightened children and a clock ticking down to nothing. So she did the only thing left. She ran. 2,000 miles west to a job she wasn't sure existed, in a town that didn't want her, with a past she couldn't outrun. If you want to see how far desperation can take a mother, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The train smelled like coal smoke and unwashed bodies. Bessie pressed her face against the window, watching Kansas flatten into nothing, then fold into distant mountains she'd only seen in pictures. Her daughter Grace slept against her shoulder, small fingers clutching Bessie's worn coat. Ruth sat across from them, 13 years old and pretending to read a newspaper someone had left behind. The twins, Samuel and Daniel, were somewhere in the next car, probably bothering passengers or stealing food from unattended bags. She should stop them. She should care. But all Bessie could think about was the paper folded in her pocket, the one with the judge's signature at the bottom. 30 days. Mama? Grace stirred, blinking up at her with eyes too big for her thin face. Are we almost there? Not yet, baby. I'm hungry. I know. There was nothing else to say. The last of their bread was gone 2 stops ago. Bessie had $1.37 left, and the train fare had already eaten most of what she'd started with. Montana was still 2 days away, maybe 3. Ruth looked up from her newspaper. She's always hungry. Ruth? I'm just saying. Ruth's voice carried that sharp edge it had developed over the past year, half anger, half something Bessie didn't want to name. Maybe if we'd stayed, we're not talking about that. You never want to talk about anything. Bessie closed her eyes. The train rocked beneath them, steady and relentless, carrying them towards something she couldn't quite picture. A ranch. 40 men who needed feeding. A kitchen she'd never seen. A town called Silver Creek that existed mostly in her imagination, wood buildings and dust and people who'd take one look at her and know exactly what she was running from. She'd answered an advertisement in the back of a newspaper, 3 lines of text that might as well have been written in desperation. Cook wanted, Maddox Ranch, Silver Creek, Montana. Room and board. Inquire by telegram. She'd sent the telegram with money she didn't have. The response came back in 4 words. When can you start? No questions about experience, no request for references. Just those 4 words that felt like a door cracking open in a burning building. She'd packed everything they owned into 2 canvas bags and left Philadelphia before Harold could stop her. Before the judge could change his mind. Before she could think too hard about what she was doing. Mama? Grace again, always Grace. Will there be food when we get there? Yes. Promise? Bessie looked down at her daughter, 6 years old, all bones and dark eyes, wearing a dress that had belonged to Ruth 2 years ago. I promise. It was a lie. She had no idea what waited for them in Montana. But that's what mothers did, wasn't it? They lied when the truth was too heavy for small shoulders. The twins came back an hour later, grinning and cocky, Daniel holding half a sandwich wrapped in waxed paper. Where'd you get that? Bessie asked. Lady in the next car gave it to us, Samuel said quickly. Too quickly. Samuel. She did. We told her we were hungry and she felt bad. She was sleeping, Daniel added. We didn't want to wake her up, so we just... You stole it. The boys exchanged a look. They were 9, identical down to the crooked front teeth and the stubborn set of their jaws. Harold's jaws. Sometimes Bessie looked at them and saw nothing but their father staring back. We were hungry, Samuel said, defiant now. What were we supposed to do? Not steal. Why not? You stole us away in the middle of the night. The words hit like a slap. Ruth looked up sharply. Grace went very still against Bessie's side. That's different, Bessie said quietly. How? She didn't have an answer. Or maybe she had too many answers, none of them good enough for a 9-year-old boy who thought the world should make sense. Eat the sandwich, she said finally. Split it between you. What about Grace? I said split it. Grace will eat when we get there. When? Not if. She had to believe that. They crossed into Montana on the third day. The landscape changed, mountains pushing up against the sky, valleys so green they hurt to look at, rivers cutting silver paths through land that seemed to go on forever. It was beautiful in a way that made Bessie's chest tight. Nothing like Philadelphia. Nothing like the brick row house where she'd spent 10 years trying to convince herself she was building a life instead of just surviving one. The train slowed as they approached Silver Creek. Not a gradual stop, more like the whole world was grinding down, reluctant to arrive. Bessie gathered their bags. "Ruth, help your sister. Boys, stay close." "We're not babies," Daniel muttered. "I didn't say you were. I said stay close." The platform was smaller than she'd imagined. Wooden planks, a single building that might have been a station house, or might have been someone's barn. 3 people waited in the afternoon heat, a woman in a green dress, an old man smoking a pipe, and a tall man in a worn hat who stood apart from the others, hands in his pockets. Bessie stepped down first, then turned to help Grace. The little girl stumbled, and Bessie caught her, felt how light she was. Too light. "You Mrs. Calloway?" The tall man had moved closer. Up close, she could see he wasn't as old as she'd first thought. Maybe 40, with weathered skin and eyes the color of winter sky. He didn't smile. "Yes." "Cole Maddox." He looked past her at the children. The telegram didn't mention kids. Would it have mattered? Might have. They stared at each other. Behind him, the woman in the green dress was whispering something to the old man, both of them watching with the kind of interest that felt like judgment. "I can cook," Bessie said. "That's what you need, isn't it? Someone who can cook?" "What I need is someone who'll stay. Last 3 cooks quit inside a month." "I'm not going anywhere." "That's what they all said." Ruth stepped down from the train, pulling her coat tight even though it wasn't cold. The twins followed, immediately starting to shove each other. Grace hid behind Bessie's skirt. Maddox watched all of this without expression. Then he nodded once, sharp. "Wagons this way. We've got an hour's drive to the ranch." He didn't offer to carry their bags. Sham. The wagon was old but sturdy, pulled by 2 horses that looked like they'd seen better days. Maddox helped the children up into the back, the only time he touched any of them, then waited for Bessie to climb up front beside him. She settled onto the hard wooden seat, bags at her feet, and tried not to think about how far she was from anything familiar. "You don't talk much," she said as they started moving. "Not much to say." "The advertisement mentioned room and board." "There's a cabin behind the main house, 3 rooms. Needs cleaning, but it's sound." 3 rooms. She'd been sharing 2 with 4 children. "That'll work." "Pays $30 a month. Meals for you and the kids included." $30. It was more than she'd made in Philadelphia, but that wasn't saying much. Harold had controlled the money, doled it out like she was a child asking for candy. She'd had to beg for grocery money, for fabric to mend the children's clothes, for everything. "That's fair," she said. Maddox glanced at her, something flickering across his face. "You run from something?" Bessie's hands tightened on her bags. "Everyone's running from something." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." Behind them, the twins were arguing about something. Ruth told them to shut up. Grace was silent. She was always silent around strangers. "Men on the ranch work hard," Maddox said after a while. "They expect 3 meals a day, hot and filling. Breakfast before dawn, lunch at noon, dinner at 6. You miss a meal, they'll let you know." "I won't miss a meal." "Last cook did, twice. That's why she's gone." "I'm not her." "No." He looked at her again, longer this time. "I don't suppose you are." The road cut through open grassland, mountains rising in the distance. Bessie had never seen so much space. It should have felt freeing. Instead, it felt exposed, like there was nowhere to hide if someone came looking. "What made you leave?" Maddox asked. "What makes you think I left anything?" "Woman doesn't drag 4 kids 2,000 miles on a whim." Bessie watched the landscape roll past. "Maybe I just wanted a change." "Maybe." He didn't sound convinced. "But you got the look of someone who jumped before she could think too hard about the landing." She didn't answer. What could she say? That he was right? That she'd left in the middle of the night while Harold was passed out drunk, gathered the children and their belongings, and ran like the house was on fire? That the only reason she'd made it this far was because she was too afraid to stop moving? The town know about us? She asked instead. They know I hired a cook, that's all. They'll ask questions. Let them ask. People don't like questions without answers. Maddox pulled the wagon to a stop. They were on a rise now, looking down into a valley where buildings clustered together. A ranch house, barns, smaller structures scattered around like someone had dropped them from the sky. Smoke rose from one of the chimneys. That's home, he said. For now, anyway. Bessie studied it, trying to see past the distance, past the strangeness of it all. Trying to imagine herself in that kitchen, feeding 40 men, keeping her children close, surviving the 30 days and whatever came after. You got a problem with people asking questions, Maddox said quietly. You picked the wrong place. Silver Creek's not big enough for secrets. Good thing I don't have any then. He almost smiled. Almost. Sure you don't. The ranch was chaos wrapped in dust and noise. Men everywhere, repairing fences, moving cattle, shouting to each other across the yard. They all stopped when the wagon rolled in, eyes tracking Bessie and the children like they were a curiosity or a threat. Maybe both. Maddox helped the children down. Kitchen's through there. You'll want to check it before dinner. Miguel's been trying to keep things going, but he's a ranch hand, not a cook. Who's Miguel? You'll meet him. Maddox grabbed their bags, started toward a small cabin set back from the main buildings. This is yours. Like I said, needs work, but it's dry and there's a stove. The cabin was dim inside, thick with dust and the smell of disuse. 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, more space than they'd had in months. Ruth walked through slowly, touching the walls like she didn't quite believe they were real. The twins immediately started fighting over which bed they'd take. Boys, Bessie's voice cut through the noise. Enough! They stopped, looked at her, then went back to arguing in whispers. Dinner's in 2 hours, Maddox said from the doorway. Kitchen's stocked, but I don't know what's still good. You'll have to figure it out. I will. He nodded, started to leave, then stopped. The men don't know about your situation, whatever it is. They don't need to know. You do your job, they'll respect that. And if they don't, then they answer to me. It wasn't comfort exactly, but it was something. The kitchen was a disaster. Pots stacked unwashed in the corner, dried food crusted on every surface, flies buzzing around scraps left on the cutting board. Someone, Miguel, she assumed, had tried to make bread that morning. The results sat on the counter like stones. Bessie stood in the doorway, Grace clinging to her hand, and felt something close to despair. Then she took a breath and got to work. Ruth, heat water. I need these pots clean before I can cook anything. Daniel, Samuel, there's wood that needs bringing in. Stack it by the stove and don't break anything. What about me? Grace asked. You stay close and don't touch the stove. They scattered. Bessie rolled up her sleeves and started sorting through the chaos, trying to figure out what she had to work with. Flour, cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, onions starting to sprout. Not much, but enough. It would have to be. She built the fire first. That was always first. Then got water boiling for the pots while she started chopping onions, salt pork, anything that would make a base for soup. 40 men. She could feed 40 men. She'd fed Harold's poker games, his business dinners, every unexpected guest he'd dragged home without warning. This was just more of the same. Except it wasn't. Because if she failed here, there was nowhere else to run. Ruth worked beside her without being asked, washing pots in water so hot it turned her hands red. The twins brought wood, then disappeared, probably exploring, probably getting into trouble. Grace sat on a stool in the corner, watching everything with those big dark eyes. Mama, she said after a while, are we staying here? Yes, baby. Forever? Bessie looked at her daughter, so small, so trusting, still believing her mother had answers to impossible questions. I don't know about forever, but for now, I like it here. You haven't even seen it yet. I like it anyway. Grace kicked her feet against the stool. It's quieter than home. Home. The word caught in Bessie's throat. That brick row house in Philadelphia wasn't home. Hadn't been home for years, if it ever was. Just a place she'd existed, counting days, trying to keep everyone fed, and Harold satisfied and herself small enough not to cause problems. Yeah, she said softly. It's quieter. The men came in at 6 exactly, a stampede of boots and loud voices and hunger. Bessie had soup ready, not fancy, but hot and thick with beans and pork. Bread she'd managed to salvage from Miguel's attempt. Coffee strong enough to strip paint. They filled the long tables, talking over each other, barely looking at her. Just another cook. Just another woman trying to do a job that had broken 3 others. She served without speaking, watching their faces for reactions. The first man to taste the soup paused, looked surprised, then kept eating. The second nodded appreciatively. By the third, word was spreading, quiet murmurs of approval, the kind of acknowledgement that men give when they don't want to admit they were worried. Maddox sat at the head of the table, watching her instead of eating. When their eyes met, he gave the smallest nod. She'd cleared the first test. After dinner, after the dishes were washed and the kitchen scrubbed clean, after the children were fed and the twins finally stopped fighting long enough to fall asleep, Bessie sat on the cabin's front step and let herself feel it. The fear, the exhaustion, the weight of everything she'd done and everything she still had to do. 27 days left. She pulled the judge's paper from her pocket, unfolded it in the darkness. She couldn't read the words, but she didn't need to. She had them memorized. Temporary custody granted to Bessie Calloway pending evaluation of living conditions and ability to provide adequate care. Court review scheduled 30 days from this date. Harold had sat in that courtroom with his lawyer, confident and calm, like he'd already won. Like the past 10 years of absence and indifference meant nothing compared to the fact that he was a man with money and she was just a woman who'd dared to leave. The judge had looked at her with something between pity and disgust. Mrs. Calloway, do you have employment? I will. Do you have a residence? I will. Do you understand that your current situation is untenable for raising 4 children? She'd understood. She'd understood that the world was stacked against her, that everything she'd survived meant nothing if she couldn't prove herself worthy by their standards. So she'd taken the 30 days like a gift she didn't deserve and run. The door opened behind her. Ruth stood there in her nightgown, arms crossed. Can't sleep? Bessie asked. Can you? Not yet. Ruth sat down beside her, close but not touching. They'd been doing this dance for months, her daughter wanting comfort, wanting answers, but too angry to ask for either. Is he going to find us? Ruth asked quietly. Bessie thought about lying, then decided her daughter deserved better. Probably. What happens then? I don't know. That's all you ever say. You don't know. You won't talk about it. You just drag us across the country and expect us to... Ruth's voice cracked. I had friends. I had school. I know. Do you? Because it doesn't feel like you know. It feels like you only think about yourself. The accusation hurt more because it carried truth. Bessie had thought about herself, had thought about survival, had thought about escape. She hadn't thought enough about what she was taking from them. You're right, she said. Ruth looked at her surprised. I'm sorry, Bessie continued. I'm sorry I took you from your friends and your school and everything familiar. I'm sorry I don't have better answers. I'm sorry I'm not... She stopped. I'm just sorry. They sat in silence. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Ruth shivered. I'm trying, Bessie said. I know it doesn't feel like enough, but I'm trying to keep us together, all of us. Why? Because you're mine. All of you. And I'm not letting him take that away. Ruth pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. I'm still angry. I know. I don't know if I'll stop being angry. That's okay too. Her daughter leaned against her then, just slightly, just enough. Bessie put an arm around her shoulders and held on. 27 days. She could do this. She had to. The next morning started at 4:30. Bessie woke in darkness, body aching from yesterday's travel and work, and forced herself up anyway. The kitchen wouldn't wait. The men wouldn't wait. She built the fire while the world was still sleeping, got coffee brewing and biscuits in the oven. By the time the sky started turning gray, She had bacon frying and eggs ready to crack. The men came in at 5:30, quieter than last night but just as hungry. This time they looked at her, really looked, sizing her up, trying to figure out if she'd last longer than the others. She served breakfast without flinching, kept the coffee coming, watched them eat and go, leaving empty plates and not much else. Miguel was the last to leave. He was young, maybe 20, with kind eyes and careful manners. "The soup last night was good, Señora." "Thank you." "Better than mine." He smiled ruefully. "Everything is better than mine. I'm glad you are here." "How long were you cooking?" 2 weeks. It felt like 2 years. He picked up his hat from the table. "If you need help with anything, the stove, the supplies, the men, you ask me, yes?" "I will." He nodded and left. Through the window, Bessie watched him join the others, already deep in conversation about the day's work. None of them looked back at the kitchen. Good. She didn't need attention, just time. Grace appeared around 7, still in her nightgown, hair tangled from sleep. "Morning, baby." "Morning, Mama." She climbed onto a stool, yawning. "Can I help?" "You can keep me company." "That's not helping." "Sure it is." Bessie made her daughter breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs and bacon and biscuits with butter. Grace ate slowly, savoring each bite like she was afraid it might disappear. "The boys are still sleeping," she reported between bites. "Let them sleep." "Ruth is crying." Bessie's hand stilled over the dishes. "She say why?" "No, she told me to go away." "Finish your breakfast. I'll check on her." But before she could, Ruth appeared in the doorway, face blotchy and eyes red. "I'm fine," she said before Bessie could ask. "You don't look fine." "I said I'm fine." Ruth grabbed a biscuit from the plate, wouldn't meet Bessie's eyes. "What do you need me to do today?" "Ruth, I'm fine, Mama. Just tell me what to do." So Bessie did. Because sometimes that was easier than pushing. Sometimes you had to let your children carry their own weight, even when you wanted to take it from them. By noon, Bessie had lunch ready. Sandwiches and leftover soup, nothing fancy but filling. The men ate quickly, already thinking about afternoon work. A few nodded to her as they left. Small acknowledgments that she was doing okay. Not great. Just okay. It would have to be enough. She was cleaning up when a woman appeared in the kitchen doorway. Not young, but not old either, dressed in clothes too nice for a ranch visit, with dark hair pinned perfectly and eyes that took in everything at once. "You're the new cook." It wasn't a question. Bessie dried her hands on her apron. "Yes, ma'am?" "Dorothy Hale." She didn't offer her hand. "I own the general store in town. I also supply most of the ranches in the area." "Pleased to meet you." "Are you?" Dorothy stepped inside, examining the kitchen like she was looking for evidence of something. "Where are you from, Mrs. Calloway?" "East." "That's vague?" "It's accurate." They stared at each other. Bessie could feel the weight of the woman's judgment, could see the calculations happening behind those sharp eyes. "You have children," Dorothy said. 4. "That must be difficult, managing them and working." "We manage." "I'm sure you do." Dorothy ran a finger along the counter, checking for dust. "Silver Creek is a small town, Mrs. Calloway. People talk. People wonder." "Let them wonder." "They'll wonder about a woman who shows up alone with 4 children and no explanation. They'll wonder what she's running from." Bessie felt her pulse quicken, but kept her voice steady. "Is there something specific you came here to say, Mrs. Hale?" "Just that I'll be watching. We all will be. This ranch is important to this community, and we can't have just anyone. I'm not just anyone. I'm the cook. That's all you need to know." Dorothy's smile was cold. "We'll see about that." She left. Bessie stood in the empty kitchen, hands shaking now that there was no one to see. 26 days. That night, after dinner was served and cleaned up, after the children were in bed and the cabin was finally quiet, Bessie sat at the small table and tried to write a letter. She didn't know who to send it to. Didn't know what to say. "Dear Harold." "No." She crossed it out. "To whom it may concern. Worse." She crumpled the paper and started again. "I'm not coming back." Whatever you told the judge, whatever you promised, it doesn't matter. The children are mine. This life is mine. You gave up the right to either when you—" She stopped. Put down the pen. What was the point? Harold wouldn't read it, wouldn't care. He'd just use it as evidence that she was unstable, irrational, unfit. She burned the letter in the stove and watched it turn to ash. Outside, the Montana night was full of sounds she didn't recognize. Not city sounds, no carriages, no shouting, no familiar rhythms of life pressed together, just wind and animals and space. So much space. She thought about Philadelphia, about the life she'd left, about Harold's face when he realized she was gone. He would have been angry. No, past angry, furious, humiliated that his wife had dared to leave, that she'd taken his children, that she'd made him look weak in front of everyone who mattered. He would come after her. She knew that. The 30 days wasn't protection. It was just a head start. But maybe, if she could prove herself here, if she could show the judge she'd built something stable— Bessie laughed bitterly at herself. Who was she kidding? She was a cook on a ranch 2,000 miles from nowhere, living in a dusty cabin with 4 children and no future past tomorrow's meals. But tomorrow's meals were something. They were more than she'd had a week ago. The days fell into rhythm. Wake before dawn. Build the fire. Feed 40 hungry men 3 times a day. Clean. Plan. Keep moving because stopping meant thinking and thinking meant fear. The children adjusted in their own ways. Grace clung close, helping in the kitchen, content to be near her mother. The twins explored every inch of the ranch, coming back dirty and excited with stories about horses and cattle and men who could rope anything. Ruth stayed angry, doing her work with tight-lipped efficiency, barely speaking unless forced to. And Bessie cooked. She stretched their supplies, making meals out of almost nothing, learned which men liked their coffee strong and which ones wanted extra bacon. Started keeping a list of complaints and preferences, adjusting accordingly. By the end of the first week, the complaints stopped. By the second week, she heard one of the men say, "Best cook we've had in years." It wasn't enough, but it was something. Maddox checked on her most evenings, appearing in the kitchen doorway like a ghost. How are supplies holding? Low on flour, could use more coffee. He made notes in a small book he carried. I'll send someone to town tomorrow. Thank you. You're doing good work. The compliment caught her off guard. Just doing my job. Previous cooks did their job too. Didn't mean they did it well. He paused. The men are starting to settle. That matters. All I'm doing is feeding them. All? He almost smiled. You ever try to work a full day on an empty stomach or bad food? Feeding them right means they work better, complain less, stay longer. That's not just cooking. That's keeping this place running. Bessie didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to accept praise without suspicion. Your boy, Maddox said after a moment. The dark-haired one, Daniel? Her chest tightened. What about him? Caught him in the barn yesterday. Wasn't causing trouble, just sitting with the horses. He's got away with them. He in your way? No, just thought you should know. Maddox shifted his weight. My son used to do that. Sit with the horses when things got too loud in his head. It was the first personal thing he'd shared. Bessie filed it away carefully. You have a son? James, he's 8. Something crossed Maddox's face. Pain, maybe, or regret. Lost his mother 2 years ago. He doesn't talk much anymore. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. He cleared his throat. Anyway, Daniel's welcome in the barn, long as he's careful. I'll tell him. After Maddox left, Bessie stood in the quiet kitchen and thought about boys who needed horses to feel safe, about mothers who couldn't protect their children from everything, about the strange ways grief carved out space inside people. 23 days left. On day 16, Dorothy Hale came back. This time she brought others, 2 women Bessie didn't recognize and a thin man in a suit who introduced himself as the county inspector. Random inspection, he said, though nothing about it felt random. We check all the kitchens in the area. Health standards, you understand. Of course. Bessie stepped aside to let them in, heart pounding. They went through everything. Checked the food storage, the cleanliness of her pots, the temperature of her stove, made notes in a leather book. whispered to each other just loud enough for Bessie to hear fragments, adequate and marginal and concerning. Dorothy stood in the corner, watching with satisfaction. "And the children?" the inspector asked. "They live here on the ranch?" "In the cabin out back. May I see it?" "Why?" "Part of the inspection, Mrs. Calloway. We need to ensure the living conditions are appropriate." She had no choice. She led them to the cabin where Ruth and Grace were cleaning up from lunch. The twins were outside somewhere. The inspector walked through slowly, noting the 2 rooms, the makeshift kitchen, the beds the children shared. His expression gave nothing away. "How long do you plan to stay in Montana?" he asked. "As long as I have work. And after that?" "I'll find more work," Dorothy spoke up. "The children attend school?" "Not yet. We only just arrived." "Education is mandatory in Montana, Mrs. Calloway." "I'm aware. I'm planning to enroll them." "When?" "Soon." Soon isn't specific. Bessie felt Ruth tense beside her, felt Grace's hand slip into hers. "Next week. I'll take them to town next week." The inspector made more notes, thanked her for her time. Left with the others, Dorothy throwing one last look over her shoulder, a look that said clearly, "I'm watching." After they were gone, Ruth exploded. "What was that? Why were they here?" "Just an inspection." "It wasn't just an inspection. That woman hates you." "Ruth, she does. You can see it. Everyone can see it." Ruth's voice rose. "What did you do? Why does she hate you?" "I didn't do anything." "Then why?" "Because some people don't need a reason." The words came out sharper than Bessie intended. "Some people just decide you don't belong, and that's enough. Now help your sister with the dishes." She walked out before Ruth could argue, before she could see the fear on Bessie's face. 19 days. The inspection had been a warning. Dorothy Hale was building a case against her, gathering evidence, preparing to use it somehow. Bessie stood outside the cabin and tried to breathe through the panic. She'd come so far. Done everything right. Kept her head down, worked hard, proved herself capable. But capable might not be enough if someone powerful decided she didn't deserve to stay. That night she found Maddox in the barn, checking on a horse with a bad leg. "The inspector came today," she said. He looked up. "I heard." "You know what that was about?" "Dorothy Hale making noise. She does that." "Why?" "Because she can." Maddox stood, brushing hay off his pants. "She's been running things in this town for 20 years. Doesn't like when things change without her approval. I'm just a cook. You're a woman who showed up without her permission. That's enough." Bessie leaned against the barn door. "Is she going to be a problem?" "Maybe. Probably." He met her eyes. "You worried?" "Should I be?" "Depends on what you're hiding." There it was again, that question he kept almost asking. "What are you running from?" "I'm not hiding anything," Bessie said. "Everyone's hiding something." "Then I guess we're even." They looked at each other across the dim barn. Outside, someone was singing, one of the ranch hands, drunk and cheerful. The horse shifted in its stall. "I can't protect you from everything," Maddox said finally, "but I can make it clear you're under my employ, that you're doing good work. That ought to count for something. And if it doesn't, then we'll figure it out. We, not you." The words settled into Bessie's chest like warmth. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. Dorothy Hale's not done." She was right. The inspector came back 3 days later, this time alone. "Mrs. Calloway, I have some concerns about the living arrangements for your children." Bessie's blood went cold. "What concerns?" "The cabin is adequate but cramped. 4 children sharing such limited space. It's not ideal. It's clean. It's dry. It's more than many families have." "Perhaps, but there are standards to consider. Particularly for," he consulted his notes, "particularly for a family under court review." The words hit like a fist. "How do you know about that?" "Public record, Mrs. Calloway. The court proceedings in Philadelphia are a matter of public record." Dorothy. It had to be Dorothy. She dug into Bessie's past, found the custody case, was now using it as ammunition. "My children are fine," Bessie said, fighting to keep her voice steady. They're fed, clothed, safe. That's what matters. What matters is what the court decides matters. The inspector closed his notebook. I'll be filing a report. You'll have an opportunity to respond. A report saying what? That the current living situation, while not immediately harmful, raises questions about long-term stability and appropriateness. He left. Bessie stood in the kitchen, shaking with fury and fear. 17 days left. And now this. She'd been so careful, had done everything right. But it wasn't enough, because someone else had decided to destroy her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Ruth found her an hour later, still standing in the kitchen, staring at nothing. "Mama, what's wrong?" Bessie looked at her daughter, 13 years old, too smart, too aware. "Nothing you need to worry about." "That's not true." "Ruth, stop treating me like a baby. I know something's wrong. I know that woman is causing problems. I know we're in trouble." Ruth's voice cracked. "Just tell me the truth. Are we going to have to leave?" The question hung between them. Bessie thought about lying, about protecting her daughter from the weight of their reality. Then she remembered what it felt like to be 13 and terrified and told that everything was fine when nothing was fine. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Someone's trying to make it hard for us to stay. I'm trying to stop them." "Who?" "A woman in town. Dorothy Hale." "Why does she care?" "I don't know that either." Ruth was quiet for a moment, then, "What can I do?" "Nothing. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is. We're all in this. Whatever happens to you happens to us." Ruth squared her shoulders. "So what can I do?" Bessie looked at her daughter and saw not a child but someone becoming something else. Someone strong. Someone fierce. Someone who wouldn't break easily. "Keep your sister close," she said. "Keep the boys out of trouble. And if anyone asks you questions about our family, about why we're here, I tell them it's none of their business." "Exactly." Ruth nodded once, firm. Then she hugged Bessie, quick and tight, before pulling away and heading back to the cabin. Bessie watched her go and felt something shift inside her chest. Her children were growing up in the middle of this mess, learning to fight because she'd taught them fighting was necessary. She didn't know if that made her a good mother or a terrible one. Maybe both. The next day, a boy appeared in the kitchen. Small, maybe 8 years old, with dark hair and eyes that reminded Bessie of someone. He stood in the doorway, not speaking, just watching. "Can I help you?" Bessie asked. The boy shook his head. "You hungry?" Another head shake. "You got a name?" Silence. Bessie went back to chopping vegetables, letting him stand there. Some children needed to be pulled into conversation. Others needed space to decide on their own terms. After a while, the boy crept closer, sat on the floor near the stove where it was warm. Grace came in, stopped when she saw him. "Who are you?" He didn't answer her either. "That's rude," Grace said. But she sat down next to him anyway, easy and unbothered. "I'm Grace. That's my mama. She makes the best biscuits in the whole world. Do you like biscuits?" The boy looked at Grace, then at Bessie, then back at Grace. "Yes," he whispered. First word, progress. "I'll make some," Bessie said. "You can help if you want." He helped. Didn't talk, but he helped, measuring flour with careful hands, watching everything Bessie did like he was memorizing it. When the biscuits came out of the oven, Bessie gave him one, still warm, with butter melting into it. He ate it slowly, then said, very quietly, "Thank you." "You're welcome." Bessie wiped her hands on her apron. "You're James, aren't you? Mr. Maddox's son?" The boy nodded. "You can come back any time you want. Kitchen's always open." He looked at her with those dark, serious eyes. "Mama used to make biscuits." "Yeah?" "Before she died." Bessie's heart broke a little. "I'm sorry, honey." "It's okay." He stood up, brushed crumbs off his pants. "Thank you for the biscuit." He left before she could say anything else. Grace looked up at Bessie. "He's sad." "Yes, baby, he is." "Can we make him more biscuits?" "I think we should." James came back the next day, and the day after that. Never saying much, just sitting in the warm kitchen, watching Bessie work. Sometimes Grace sat with him. Sometimes the twins tried to get him to play, and he'd shake his head, preferring stillness. On the fourth day, he brought his father. Maddox stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. James says you've been feeding him. Just biscuits. He's not in the way. I didn't say he was. Maddox rubbed the back of his neck. He doesn't talk to most people anymore, since his mother. But he talks about your biscuits. They're just biscuits. To you, maybe. Maddox looked at his son, something soft in his expression. To him, there's something else. James was helping Grace stack wooden spoons, both of them completely focused on the task. He can come by whenever he wants, Bessie said, long as he's not bothering you. He's not bothering me. Maddox paused. Thank you. Don't thank me for feeding a hungry kid. I'm not thanking you for that. He met her eyes. I'm thanking you for seeing him. He left with James, the boy looking back once at the kitchen before following his father out. Bessie stood there feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Useful. Not just as a cook or a mother or someone trying to survive. Just useful. Just human. It was enough to make her cry, so she didn't let herself. 15 days to go. She had work to do. 14 days left, and Bessie woke to the smell of smoke that wasn't coming from her stove. She stumbled out of the cabin to find half the ranch hands gathered around the bunkhouse, watching black smoke pour from a window. Miguel was shouting orders, men running with buckets, the whole scene lit orange in the pre-dawn darkness. Stay inside, Bessie told Ruth, who'd appeared beside her. Keep the others in. What's happening? Fire, now go! She ran toward the chaos. One of the men grabbed her arm. Ma'am, you should stay back. Is anyone hurt? Don't think so, but then I'm helping. The fire wasn't big yet, contained to one corner of the bunkhouse, where someone's lamp had tipped over. But it was hungry, eating through dry wood and old blankets, and the men's buckets weren't enough. Bessie grabbed a bucket, filled it from the water barrel, passed it down the line. Again and again, arms burning, dress soaked, breathing in smoke until her lungs ached. Around her, men worked with the kind of focus that came from knowing everything could be lost if they stopped. Maddox appeared from somewhere, his shirt already black with soot. He took one look at Bessie and barked, I told you to stay back. You need help. Not from... He stopped himself, grabbed a bucket from her hands. Fine, but if that roof comes down, you run. Understand? She understood. It took an hour to kill the fire completely. By the time the sun came up, the bunkhouse corner was a charred mess, but the building still stood. No one was hurt. Nothing irreplaceable was lost. The men collapsed on the ground, exhausted. Someone passed around a flask. Bessie sat on a water barrel, dress ruined, face streaked with ash, feeling the adrenaline drain out of her all at once. That was stupid, Maddox said, appearing beside her. I'm fine. You could have been killed. So could you. He didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence, watching the smoke clear, the ranch slowly coming back to life around them. You're bleeding, he said after a while. Bessie looked down at her hands, raw and blistered from the bucket handles, one palm split open. She hadn't even felt it during the fire. Now it throbbed. Come on, Maddox stood, held out a hand. Let's get that cleaned up. She followed him to the main house, into a kitchen much larger than hers. He sat her at the table, brought out bandages and a bottle of something that smelled like medicine and pain. This'll hurt, he warned. I've had worse. He cleaned the cut carefully, his hands rougher than she'd expected, but steady. She watched him work, this quiet man who'd given her a chance when no one else would. Why'd you hire me? She asked suddenly. Maddox didn't look up. Needed a cook. You didn't ask questions, didn't check references, just said yes. So? So why? He finished wrapping her hand, sat back. You want the truth? That'd be nice. You look desperate enough to stay. He met her eyes. The others, they took the job because they needed work, but they always had somewhere else to go if it got hard. You didn't. I could see that. And you thought that was a good thing? I thought it meant you'd fight harder to make it work. He paused. Was I wrong? Bessie looked at her bandaged hands, thought about everything she'd done in the past 2 weeks, the early mornings, the endless meals, the careful balancing of supplies and tempers, and her own fear. No, You weren't wrong. Then we're even. Outside, someone called for Maddox. He stood, then stopped at the door. The men are talking about what you did this morning, helping with the fire. And they respect it. That matters more than you think. After he left, Bessie sat in the quiet kitchen and let herself feel it, the exhaustion, the pain, the strange pride of having done something right. 13 days. She could make it 13 more days. She had to believe that. The twins found her later, both talking at once about the fire, about the smoke, about how they'd wanted to help, but Ruth wouldn't let them. Ruth was right, Bessie said. That wasn't a place for children. We're not children, Daniel protested. We're almost 10. You're 9. That's almost 10. It's also not 10. She pulled them close despite their squirming. You scared? Samuel shook his head too quickly. No. It's okay if you are. Fire's scary. We weren't scared, Daniel said. It was loud, and everyone was running. But you're okay now. We're okay. Samuel pulled away, trying to look tough. Can we go see the bunkhouse? Not until the men say it's safe. They ran off, already arguing about something else. Bessie watched them go and thought about how resilient children were, how they could see something terrifying and move past it before breakfast. She wished she had that gift. The fire changed something on the ranch. Word spread about the cook who'd helped fight it, who'd worked alongside the men like she belonged there. At dinner that night, they didn't just nod at her. They thanked her. Not much, not loud, but it was there. Good stew, ma'am. Appreciate what you did this morning. Best biscuits I've had in Montana. Small things, but they built into something bigger. Miguel stayed after the others left, helping her clean up without being asked. The men like you, he said, scrubbing a pot. They didn't like the last cook. What was wrong with her? She thought she was better than them, served food like she was doing a favor. He shrugged. You serve food like you understand what it means to be hungry. Bessie stopped mid-wipe. That obvious? To someone who's been hungry? Yes. Miguel smiled gently. But don't worry, they don't care where you came from, only that you're here now. If only that were true everywhere. Dorothy Hale returned 3 days later, this time with a younger woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Fletcher, the school teacher. Mrs. Calloway, Dorothy said, all false sweetness. We came to discuss enrolling your children in school. Bessie wiped flour off her hands. I was planning to bring them next week. Were you? Only it's been nearly 3 weeks since you arrived. Mrs. Fletcher pulled out a ledger. Montana law requires all children between 6 and 16 to attend school. Your children are Ruth is 13, the twins are 9, Grace is 6. Then 3 of them should already be enrolled. I've been getting us settled. Of course. Dorothy's smile didn't reach her eyes. But we can't make exceptions, especially for families under court supervision. There it was, the threat wrapped in concern. Mrs. Fletcher looked uncomfortable. I'm sure Mrs. Calloway understands the importance of education. I do, Bessie said evenly. I'll bring them Monday morning. Excellent. Dorothy ran a finger along the counter again, that same gesture from before. And how are the living conditions? The inspector's report was quite detailed. The children are fine. Are they? 4 children in 2 rooms, their mother working such long hours? She shook her head. It can't be easy. We manage. I'm sure you try. Dorothy leaned in slightly. But trying isn't always enough, is it? Especially when there are outside concerns. Bessie felt her jaw tighten. Is there something specific you want to say to me, Mrs. Hale? Just that Silver Creek takes care of its own. But you're not one of us yet. And until you are, if you ever are, people will watch. People will wonder. People will judge. Let them. Even if that judgment affects your children, the words hit exactly where Dorothy intended. Bessie forced herself to stay calm. My children are my concern. For now. Dorothy gathered her shawl. Come along, Mrs. Fletcher. We've taken up enough of Mrs. Calloway's valuable time. They left. Bessie stood shaking with anger and fear, wanting to throw something, scream, fight back somehow. Instead, she made bread. Kneaded the dough until her hands ached, until the fury worked itself out through her fingers. Ruth appeared in the doorway. I heard what that woman said. You shouldn't have been listening. She's trying to hurt us. I know. Why won't you fight back? Bessie slammed the dough onto the counter harder than necessary. What do you think I'm doing? You think cooking 3 meals a day and keeping this place running and getting you enrolled in school, you think that's not fighting? It's not enough. Then what do you want me to do? Go to town and make a scene? Give her more ammunition? Bessie's voice cracked. I'm doing everything I can, Ruth. Everything. Her daughter's face crumpled. I know. I'm sorry. I hate her. So do I. Bessie pulled Ruth into a hug, flour-covered hands and all. But hating her doesn't help us. Surviving helps us. So that's what we're going to do. Monday morning, Bessie walked all 4 children into Silver Creek. The town was smaller than she'd imagined, a main street with a general store, a church, a handful of other buildings. People stopped what they were doing to watch them pass. Bessie kept her head up and her children close. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a white building with a bell tower. Mrs. Fletcher met them at the door, warmer without Dorothy present. Welcome, she said to the children. Ruth, you'll be with the older students. Boys, you're in the middle group. And Grace, she smiled at the little girl. You'll be with me and the youngest ones. Grace hid behind Bessie's skirt. She's shy, Bessie said. Give her time. Of course. Mrs. Fletcher knelt down. Grace, would you like to see where you'll sit? We have new readers that just arrived from Denver. Grace peeked out, interested despite her fear. Bessie watched her children file into the school, Ruth looking back once with an expression Bessie couldn't quite read. Then they were gone, and she was alone in a town that didn't want her. She walked back past the general store. Dorothy stood in the window watching. Bessie didn't look away, didn't duck her head, just kept walking like she had every right to be there. Because she did. At the ranch, Maddox was waiting by the kitchen. Children get enrolled? Yes. Good. He shifted his weight. Listen, I need to talk to you about something. Bessie's stomach dropped. If this is about Dorothy Hale, it's about supplies. We're running low on everything. I need to make a big order from town, which means dealing with Dorothy's store. She'll use it against me somehow. Probably. He met her eyes. But I'm not asking your permission. I'm telling you so you're prepared. She might try to withhold supplies, claim we're late on payment, something like that. Can she do that? She owns the only store for 50 miles. She can do whatever she wants. Bessie leaned against the doorframe. So what do we do? We order what we need. Pay on time. Don't give her any excuse. He paused. And we have each other's backs. That phrase again. We. Okay, Bessie said. Then let's order what we need. The supplies came 3 days later, delivered by a teenage boy who wouldn't meet Bessie's eyes. She checked the order against the list Maddox had given her. Half of it was missing. Where's the rest? She asked the boy. This is everything Mrs. Hale sent. The order was for 60 pounds of flour. This is 30. He shrugged, uncomfortable. I just deliver what she gives me, ma'am. Bessie signed for the delivery and watched him leave. Then she found Maddox in the barn. She shorted us. His jaw tightened. How much? Half the flour, no coffee, barely any sugar. Everything else is there, but just less. That, Maddox stopped himself, visibly trying to stay calm. That's going to make things difficult. I can stretch it, make do. You shouldn't have to. But I can. Bessie crossed her arms. She wants me to fail, wants the men to complain about the food. I'm not giving her that. Maddox looked at her for a long moment. You're tougher than you look. I've had practice. That evening, Bessie sat down and replanned every meal for the next 2 weeks. Less bread, more beans, cornmeal instead of flour, coffee rationed carefully. The men wouldn't be happy, but they'd be fed. She worked late into the night, adjusting recipes, calculating portions. Ruth came out to find her still at the table. You should sleep, her daughter said. Soon. Mama, Ruth sat down across from her. What happens if you can't make it work? I'll make it work. But what if... I'll make it work, Ruth. Bessie put down her pencil. I don't know how yet, but I will. Because the alternative is going back, and that's not happening. What was it like back there? Bessie had never told her children the truth, never explained why they'd left so suddenly, why their father hadn't come with them. She'd let them build their own stories, their own explanations. Maybe that had been wrong. It was like drowning, she said quietly. Every day, feeling like I couldn't breathe, like the walls were closing in and there was nowhere to go. Because of father? Because of a lot of things. Bessie looked at her daughter. You remember how he was? I remember he was loud, and you were quiet. I was quiet because it was safer. Ruth processed this. Did he hurt you? Bessie thought about the truth. The nights Harold came home drunk, the arguments that turned to broken dishes, the feeling of being small and powerless in her own home. But Ruth didn't need all of it. Yes, she said simply, sometimes. I'm glad we left. Me too. They sat together in the quiet kitchen, mother and daughter, survivors both. James started spending more time in the kitchen, not just for biscuits anymore. He'd help Grace set the table, or stack firewood, or just sit quietly while Bessie worked. She learned his rhythms, his silences, the way he'd tense up when voices got too loud. One afternoon, he brought a picture he'd drawn. What's this? Bessie asked, studying the pencil sketch of a woman standing by a stove. You, James said, and that's Grace helping, and those are biscuits. It's real good, honey. Can I leave it here, in the kitchen? Of course you can. She pinned it to the wall right where she could see it while she worked. James smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen from him. Maddox noticed. That evening, he lingered after dinner longer than usual. James drew you a picture. He did. It's good. He hasn't drawn anything since his mother died. Maddox's voice was rough. Thank you. I didn't do anything. You let him be here. That's not nothing. He cleared his throat. His mother, she was sick for a long time before she passed. James spent months watching her fade. By the end, he wouldn't leave her side. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. Maddox looked at the picture on the wall. He's starting to come back, slowly, and I think you being here helps. I'm just feeding him. You're doing more than that. You're making this place feel like a home again instead of just a ranch. He met her eyes. That matters. Bessie didn't know what to say, didn't know how to accept the weight of his gratitude. I should get back, she said finally. Children need checking on. Right, of course. But neither of them moved. The moment stretched, loaded with things neither of them were ready to say. Then Miguel called from outside and the spell broke. Maddox left. Bessie stood in the kitchen, heart racing for reasons she didn't want to examine too closely. 10 days left. The children came home from school with stories. Ruth had made a friend, a girl named Sarah who sat next to her. The twins had gotten in trouble for racing during recess. Grace had read an entire book by herself. Mrs. Fletcher says I'm good at reading, Grace announced proudly. Of course you are, Bessie kissed the top of her head. You're good at everything. Not arithmetic. Nobody's perfect. The normalcy of it felt surreal. Children going to school, coming home with everyday complaints and victories, like they were a regular family in a regular place, like they weren't counting down days until everything fell apart. But the countdown was real. Bessie felt it every morning when she woke up, every night when she tried to sleep. Harold was out there somewhere, building his case, preparing to take the children back. She had to be ready. That Sunday, she asked Miguel about lawyers in the area. There's one in town, he said. Mr. Preston, why? Just curious. But Miguel wasn't fooled. You in some kind of trouble, Senora? Maybe. I don't know yet. He didn't push, just gave her Preston's address and squeezed her shoulder. You need help, you ask. See? See. She went to see Preston the next day, leaving the children with Ruth. His office was above the general store. Of course it was. Dorothy's territory. Preston was older, sharp-eyed, with ink-stained fingers, and a way of listening that made Bessie feel like he saw straight through her. She told him everything. About Harold, about the custody hearing, about the 30 days and the inspection and Dorothy Hale's vendetta. When she finished, Preston leaned back in his chair. That's quite a situation, Mrs. Calloway. Can you help? I can try, but I'll be honest, custody cases are difficult, especially when the father has resources and the mother is, he paused delicately, new to the area. I'm not going back to Philadelphia. Then you need to prove you can provide a stable home here. Do you have character references? Cole Maddox, the ranch owner. That'll help. Anyone else? She thought about Miguel, about Mrs. Fletcher, about the ranch hands who nodded at her over dinner. Maybe. Get me names, written statements if possible, and Mrs. Calloway? Preston's expression softened. Whatever happens, make sure you're fighting for the right reasons. What's that supposed to mean? It means sometimes people run so fast from one bad situation they end up in another. Make sure this, Montana, the ranch, all of it, make sure it's what you really want, not just what you're running toward. Bessie stood. How much do I owe you? First consultation's free. After that, we'll see. She left feeling both better and worse. Better because she had someone who might help. Worse because Preston had asked the question she'd been avoiding. Was she running toward something or just away? That night, she couldn't sleep. She walked out to the porch and found Maddox already there, smoking a cigarette. Couldn't sleep either, he asked. Lots on my mind. He offered her the cigarette. She took it, pulled in smoke that burned her throat, handed it back. I went to see a lawyer today, she said. Preston? Yes. He's good. Fair. Maddox took a drag. You preparing for a fight? I think the fight's coming whether I'm prepared or not. They stood in silence, watching the stars. Montana had more stars than Philadelphia, more sky, more everything. Why'd you really come here? Maddox asked. Bessie thought about lying, about keeping her walls up like she'd learned to do. Then she thought about the children sleeping inside, about the life she was trying to build, about how tired she was of carrying secrets. My husband, ex-husband, he wasn't a good man. I stayed longer than I should have. Then one day I realized if I didn't leave, I never would. She wrapped her arms around herself. So I left. Took the kids and ran. That took courage. It took desperation. Same thing sometimes. Maddox stubbed out the cigarette. He coming after you? Yes? When? 8 days. There's a hearing. He'll try to take the children. Will he succeed? I don't know. Her voice cracked. I'm doing everything right, but it might not be enough. Maddox turned to face her fully. What do you need? What? To fight him. What do you need? Bessie looked at this quiet man who'd given her a chance, who'd stood up for her without asking why, who was offering help like it was the simplest thing in the world. I don't know, she admitted. Preston said I need character references, people who can testify that I'm providing a good home. Then you've got me. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm offering anyway. His expression was serious. You've been good for this ranch, good for James, good for a lot of things. I'm not letting someone take that away without a fight. Bessie felt tears threaten and blinked them back hard. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We haven't won. But we're trying. Yeah. He almost smiled. We're trying. Inside, Grace cried out in her sleep. Bessie went to check on her, found her daughter tangled in blankets, dreaming. Shh, baby. I'm here. Grace settled, reached for Bessie's hand without waking. Bessie sat with her until her breathing evened out, until the fear passed. 7 days left. She could do this. She had people in her corner now. Not many, but enough. It had to be enough. The telegram arrived on day 23. Bessie was kneading bread when Miguel brought it to the kitchen, his face tight with concern. She wiped her hands on her apron, already knowing what it would say before she opened it. Custody hearing rescheduled. 4 days. Philadelphia courthouse. Attendance mandatory. Her hand shook reading it. 4 days. Not 8. Someone had moved the hearing up, compressed her timeline, stolen the days she'd been counting on. Bad news? Miguel asked quietly. The worst. She folded the telegram, slipped it in her pocket. I need to find Mr. Maddox. He was in the south pasture helping mend a fence. When he saw her face, he dropped his tools and came to meet her. What happened? She handed him the telegram, watched his jaw tighten as he read. 4 days, he said. That's not enough time. It's what I've got. Can you even get to Philadelphia in 4 days? Bessie did the math in her head. 2 days by train, maybe less if she could catch the express. That left 2 days to prepare, to gather whatever evidence she could, to convince a judge 2,000 miles away that she deserved to keep her children. I have to try. What about the kids? They stay here. I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't take them back there. If the judge rules against me, if Harold... She couldn't finish. The thought of walking into that courtroom with her children, of watching them be taken away in front of her, was too much. Maddox was quiet for a long moment. Then, they can stay at the ranch. Ruth's old enough to watch the younger ones for a few days. I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. He looked at her straight. You've got enough to worry about. Let me handle this part. Bessie felt something break loose in her chest. Thank you. Save it for after you win. He folded the telegram, handed it back. You need money for the ticket? I have enough. You sure? She wasn't sure of anything, but she had a little money saved, and she'd make it work somehow. I'm sure. Then go see Preston. Get whatever paperwork he thinks will help. I'll write a letter tonight, character reference, employment verification, whatever you need. Cole, go. We're wasting time. She went. Preston's office felt smaller this time, the walls pressing in as she explained about the telegram, about the shortened timeline, about everything falling apart faster than she'd prepared for. 4 days is tight, Preston said, shuffling through papers. But it's doable. Here's what you need. My letter establishing you as a client in good standing seeking legal counsel. Maddox's letter about your employment and character. If you can get statements from anyone else, the school teacher, other ranch workers, anyone who can speak to your stability here, bring those too. What about evidence of Harold's, of his behavior? Do you have any? Police reports, witness statements, medical records? Bessie shook her head. I never reported it, never went to a doctor. That makes it harder. It becomes your word against his. Preston leaned forward. Mrs. Calloway, I need you to understand something. The law favors fathers, especially fathers with means. You leaving the marital home, taking the children without his consent, a judge could see that as kidnapping. He didn't want them when we were there. Can you prove that? The children will tell. Children's testimony in custody cases is rarely given full weight, especially young children. He softened slightly. I'm not saying you can't win, but you need to be prepared for how hard this fight is going to be. Bessie stood. I've been preparing for hard my whole life. Back at the ranch, she told the children. Ruth took it best, nodded once, asked practical questions about how long Bessie would be gone. The twins got loud, arguing about whether they could manage without her. Grace cried, I don't want you to go, she sobbed into Bessie's dress. What if you don't come back? I'm coming back, baby. I promise. What if Father takes you away? Bessie knelt down to Grace's level. Your father doesn't want me. He wants you. And I'm going to make sure he doesn't get you. How? By telling the judge the truth about our life here, about how we're doing good. Grace's lower lip trembled. What if the judge doesn't believe you? It was the question Bessie had been avoiding. Then I'll fight harder until he does. That night, she packed a small bag, one dress, clean underclothes, the letters from Preston and Maddox. Everything she owned that mattered fit in a canvas satchel. Ruth found her sitting on the bed, staring at nothing. You scared? Her daughter asked. Terrified. Good. That means you'll fight harder. Ruth sat beside her. Mama, I need to tell you something. What is it? I remember more than you think. About Father. About why we left. Ruth's voice was steady but quiet. I heard the fights, saw the bruises you tried to hide. I'm 13, not stupid. Bessie's throat tightened. Ruth, I know you were protecting us, and I know I've been angry, but it wasn't at you. Not really. Ruth looked at her hands. I was angry that we had to leave, that he made it so we couldn't stay, that the world is like this. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, just win. Ruth met her eyes. Whatever it takes, you win, because I'm not going back to him. None of us are. They held each other while outside the Montana night settled in, vast and indifferent to their fear. Morning came too fast. Bessie made breakfast for the ranch hands one last time, her movements automatic, while her mind spun ahead to courtrooms and judges and Harold's smug face. The men noticed something was wrong. Miguel pulled her aside as she was cleaning up. "You're leaving." "Just for a few days." "The hearing." It wasn't a question. Word had spread somehow, maybe through Preston, maybe through Dorothy's gossip network. "You need anything? You ask. Money, letters, someone to go with you? I can't ask that." "Then I'm offering without asking." He squeezed her shoulder. "You've been good to us, Senora. We don't forget that." By the time she had to leave for town to catch the train, half the ranch hands had lined up outside the kitchen. Each one pressed something into her hands. A few dollars, a letter scrawled in rough handwriting, a carved wooden cross that she accepted even though it meant nothing to her, tokens of support from men who barely knew her but respected what she'd built. "You come back," one of them said. "Ranch needs you." "I'll come back," she promised. Maddox drove her to the station in the wagon, James sitting between them. The boy hadn't said much, just insisted on coming along. At the platform, Maddox handed her an envelope. "Train ticket and extra money. Don't argue. You'll need it. Cole, if you come back and try to pay me back, I'll be insulted." He glanced at James, then back at her. "My son barely spoke for 2 years. Now he draws pictures and makes biscuits and laughs. You did that, so take the money and win your fight." The train whistle blew. Bessie had to go. James hugged her suddenly, fiercely. "Come back," he whispered. "I will, honey. I promise." She boarded the train and watched through the window as Montana disappeared behind her, watched the mountains fade to plains, the wide sky narrow to familiar horizons. Every mile took her closer to the past she'd tried to escape. The train was crowded, loud, uncomfortable. Bessie sat with her satchel clutched to her chest and tried to prepare for what was coming. She read through the letters, Preston's precise legal language, Maddox's straightforward accounting of her work and character, Miguel's broken English describing how she'd turned the ranch kitchen around. Even Mrs. Fletcher had written something, sent via Ruth, praising Bessie's dedication to getting her children educated. It wasn't enough. She knew it wasn't enough. But it was all she had. Philadelphia looked exactly the same. The streets she'd walked for 10 years, the buildings where she'd felt so small, the whole city pressing in like it wanted to suffocate her. Bessie stood outside the train station and had to fight the urge to turn around and run. She found a cheap boarding house near the courthouse, paid for 2 nights, and tried to sleep. Failed. Lay awake staring at water stains on the ceiling, thinking about her children 2,000 miles away. The courthouse was gray stone and cold marble, designed to make people feel insignificant. Bessie walked in wearing her best dress, which wasn't saying much, and carrying her satchel of letters like a shield. Harold was already there. He looked good, better than she remembered. Clean-shaven, expensive suit, every inch the respectable businessman. His lawyer was even more polished, the kind of man who'd gone to fancy schools and never questioned his right to be anywhere. Harold saw her and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Bessie, you look rustic." "Harold, where are my children?" "Safe." "That's debatable." He nodded to his lawyer. "This is Mr. Whitmore. He's going to help me bring our children home where they belong." "They are home." "In Montana? Working on some ranch?" Harold's voice dripped contempt. "You've dragged them to the middle of nowhere, forced them into labor, deprived them of proper society." "I got them away from you." His expression hardened. "Careful, Bessie. The judge is watching." She turned and saw the judge entering, the same one from before, the one who'd looked at her with pity and disgust. Her stomach dropped. The hearing started badly and got worse. Harold's lawyer painted a picture of a desperate, unstable woman who'd kidnapped 4 children and fled across the country. He had documentation of her sudden departure, testimony from neighbors about her erratic behavior, even a statement from Dorothy Hale, of course Dorothy had gotten involved, questioning the suitability of the ranch environment for children. "Your Honor," Whitmore said smoothly, "Mr. Calloway is a devoted father who has been separated from his children through no fault of his own. He's established a proper home, enrolled them in excellent schools, provided everything they could need. Meanwhile, Mrs. Calloway has taken them to work on a cattle ranch where she serves meals to 40 rough men. This is hardly an appropriate environment for young, impressionable children. The judge looked at Bessie. Mrs. Calloway, do you have representation? No, Your Honor, but I have letters. Letters aren't a lawyer. I understand that, but they speak to my character and the life I've built for my children. The life you've built in, he consulted his notes, 2.5 weeks? Put like that, it sounded ridiculous. Bessie felt the room tilting against her. Your Honor, my children are fed, clothed, educated, and safe. They're thriving in Montana. Are they? Harold interrupted. Your Honor, I have here a report from a county inspector detailing the cramped living conditions, the lack of proper supervision while Mrs. Calloway works excessive hours, concerns about the children's safety around dangerous ranch equipment. Those concerns are exaggerated, Bessie cut in, her voice rising. Dorothy Hale orchestrated that inspection to discredit me. She's been trying to drive me out of Silver Creek since I arrived. Mrs. Calloway, the judge said sharply, you will speak when spoken to. She fell silent, hands shaking with fury. Whitmore continued, methodical and devastating. He questioned her ability to provide, her judgment in uprooting the children, her fitness as a mother. Every point he made was designed to paint her as reckless, selfish, unfit. Harold sat there looking concerned and reasonable, the perfect victim of an unstable wife. Bessie wanted to scream, wanted to tell them all the truth about Harold's drinking, his temper, his complete indifference to the children until he realized their absence made him look bad. But every time she tried to speak, the judge cut her off, or Whitmore talked over her. Finally, the judge held up his hand. Mrs. Calloway, I'll give you an opportunity to present your evidence, but make it brief. Brief. Her entire defense had to be brief. She pulled out the letters with shaking hands. Your Honor, these are character references from my employer, a lawyer in Montana, the children's school teacher, and several others who can attest to the stability I've established. In 2.5 weeks, the judge repeated. Mrs. Calloway, stability takes time to demonstrate. You can't simply run away and expect the court to approve. I didn't run away. I left an abusive situation. Do you have evidence of abuse? My word is not evidence. The judge's tone was final. Without documentation, without witnesses, without any corroboration, it's simply an accusation. Bessie felt everything slipping away. Your Honor, if you'd just listen. I have listened, Mrs. Calloway, and what I've heard concerns me greatly. He looked at the papers in front of him. You've demonstrated poor judgment, instability, and a willingness to uproot your children on a whim. Meanwhile, Mr. Calloway has maintained a steady home and can provide far better opportunities. He doesn't want them. The words burst out before she could stop them. He never wanted them. He wants to win. He wants to punish me for leaving. He'll take those children home and ignore them just like he always did, and they'll grow up thinking that's what love looks like. Mrs. Calloway! The judge's voice cracked like a whip. You will compose yourself, or I will hold you in contempt. She forced herself to be quiet, to swallow the rage and fear and desperation. Harold's lawyer stood. Your Honor, I think Mrs. Calloway's outburst demonstrates exactly the kind of instability we've been discussing. Mr. Calloway is prepared to take full custody immediately. The children aren't here, Bessie said. They're in Montana. The judge frowned. You didn't bring them to the hearing? No. Why not? Because I was afraid if I lost, they'd be taken from me in front of everyone. I couldn't. Her voice broke. I couldn't do that to them. So you left them 2,000 miles away with strangers? With my employer, with people who care about them. People you've known for 2 weeks. The judge shook his head. Mrs. Calloway, you're not helping your case. The hearing went on for another hour. Bessie tried to defend herself, tried to explain, but every word seemed to make things worse. The judge clearly believed Harold's version, the devoted father wronged by an irrational wife. Finally, mercifully, it ended. I'll issue my ruling tomorrow morning, the judge said. Mrs. Calloway, you're to remain in Philadelphia until then. Mr. Calloway, the same applies to you. Court is adjourned. Bessie walked out on shaking legs. Made it to the courthouse steps before she had to sit down, head in her hands. She'd lost. She could feel it. Tomorrow the judge would give Harold custody, and she'd have nothing. "Bessie," she looked up. Harold stood over her, that same satisfied smile on his face. "You should have stayed," he said. "Could have avoided all this unpleasantness." "Go to hell." "Such language. And you wonder why I'm concerned about you raising children." He crouched down to her level. "Here's what's going to happen. The judge will rule in my favor tomorrow. You'll go back to Montana, pack up the children, and bring them home. If you fight me on this, I'll have you arrested for kidnapping. Understand? They're my children too. Not for much longer." He stood. "You had your chance to be reasonable. You chose this." He walked away, confident and untouchable. Bessie sat on the courthouse steps as the afternoon faded to evening, trying to figure out what to do. She could run again, take the train back to Montana tonight, grab the children, disappear. But where would they go? And how long before Harold found them? She was trapped. The system was rigged against her, and she'd known it from the start, but had hoped anyway. Hope was a mistake. She walked back to the boarding house in a daze, barely seeing the streets around her. The landlady gave her a concerned look, but didn't ask questions. Bessie climbed the stairs to her rented room and sat on the bed, staring at nothing. A knock on the door startled her. "Mrs. Calloway?" A boy's voice. "Telegram for you." She opened the door. The boy handed her a yellow envelope and disappeared down the stairs before she could tip him. The telegram was from Maddox. "Children fine. Stop. Ranch running smooth. Stop. Fight like hell. Stop." She read it 3 times. Felt something settle in her chest. He was right. She hadn't fought yet. Not really. She'd let Whitmore run over her, let the judge dismiss her, let Harold control the narrative. Tomorrow she'd do better. Tomorrow she'd fight. She spent the rest of the night preparing, wrote out everything she wanted to say, every point she needed to make, practiced in the mirror until her voice stopped shaking, made herself into something harder than the woman who'd sat silent in that courtroom. Morning came cold and gray. Bessie dressed carefully, pinned her hair tight, and walked back to the courthouse like she was going to war. The courtroom was less crowded this time. Just her, Harold, and his lawyer, the judge, and a few observers. Bessie sat straight-backed and waited. The judge entered. Everyone stood. "I've reviewed the evidence and testimony from yesterday's hearing," he began. "This is a difficult case involving 2 parents who clearly have different views on what's best for their children." Here it comes, Bessie thought. The part where he gives them to Harold. "However, I have some concerns about both parties." The judge looked at Harold. "Mr. Calloway, while you present as stable and successful, I note that you showed little interest in your children's daily lives during the marriage. Your own testimony indicates you worked long hours and left childcare primarily to your wife." Harold's lawyer started to object, but the judge held up his hand. "And Mrs. Calloway, while your dedication to your children is evident, your impulsive decision to relocate them across the country raises serious questions about judgment and stability." Bessie's heart sank. "That said," the judge continued, "I'm not prepared to make a final ruling today." "What?" "I'm ordering a continuation of the temporary custody arrangement for an additional 60 days. During that time, Mrs. Calloway will remain in Montana with the children. Mr. Calloway will have the right to visit, supervised, once during that period. A court-appointed investigator will visit the Montana residence and file a report on the living conditions and the children's well-being." He looked directly at Bessie. "Mrs. Calloway, this is your opportunity to prove that Montana is a viable, stable home for your children. I suggest you make the most of it. If the investigator's report is unfavorable, or if you fail to cooperate fully, I will have no choice but to grant full custody to Mr. Calloway. Understood?" "Yes, Your Honor." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Mr. Calloway, if you attempt to interfere with this arrangement in any way, if you harass Mrs. Calloway, attempt to remove the children from Montana, or obstruct the investigation, I will view that very unfavorably. Understood?" Harold's jaw was tight. "Yes, Your Honor." "Good. We'll reconvene in 60 days, court adjourned." It wasn't a win, but it wasn't a loss either. It was time. 60 more days to prove herself. Bessie left the courthouse on trembling legs. Harold caught up to her on the street. "This isn't over," he said. No, it's not. 60 days, Bessie. That investigator is going to see exactly what I see. A desperate woman who can't provide for her children. Maybe. Or maybe they'll see what I see. 4 children who are finally safe and happy. We'll see. He stepped closer, lowered his voice. You can't win this. You know that, right? Even if you make it through the next 60 days, even if the investigator says nice things, I have money, connections, lawyers. What do you have? I have them. And that's more than you've ever had. She walked away before he could respond, before he could see how scared she still was. The train back to Montana took 2 days. Bessie spent them going over everything in her head. 60 days. An investigator coming to judge her life. Harold's threat hanging over everything, but also 60 more days with her children. 60 days to build something stronger. 60 days to prove the judge wrong. She could work with that. The ranch appeared on the horizon like a promise. Bessie felt something in her chest ease at the sight of it. The familiar buildings, the mountains beyond, the wide Montana sky. Home. When had it become home? Maddox was waiting at the station with James. The boy ran to her, hugged her hard. You came back. I said I would. She looked at Maddox over James's head. How bad is it? See for yourself. At the ranch, the children came running. All 4 of them, loud and chaotic and whole. Grace crashed into her so hard they both almost fell. The twins talked over each other about everything that had happened. Ruth hung back, waiting, then stepped forward for a hug that said more than words could. I didn't lose, Bessie told them. Not yet. But you didn't win either, Ruth said. Not yet. That night, after the children were asleep, Bessie told Maddox everything. The hearing, the judge's ruling, the investigator who would come in the next few weeks. 60 days to prove I can do this, she finished. And if I can't, then we make sure you can. Maddox's voice was firm. Whatever needs fixing, we fix it. Whatever looks bad, we make it look good. That investigator shows up, they see a stable home with happy kids. It's not that simple. Nothing is. But you've built something here, Bessie. In 3 weeks, you've turned this kitchen around, helped my son laugh again, earned respect from 40 grown men who don't give it easy. Don't tell me you can't do this. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that hard work and good intentions would be enough. But she'd learned the hard way that the world didn't work like that. Still, she had 60 days, and she was going to fight for every single one of them. The investigator's letter arrived 2 weeks later. His name was Thomas Graves, and he'd be visiting the ranch in 10 days to assess the living situation and interview the children. 10 days to make everything perfect. Bessie stood in the cabin doorway, looking at the space with fresh eyes. 2 rooms that had seemed adequate now felt cramped and shabby. The walls needed paint. The floorboards creaked. One window had a crack running through it. We can fix this, Maddox said behind her. She turned. It's a lot to fix in 10 days. Then we'd better get started. He wasn't alone. Miguel stood with him, along with 3 other ranch hands. They'd brought tools, paint, lumber. We help, Senora, Miguel said simply. You tell us what needs doing. Bessie felt her throat tighten. You don't have to. We know we don't have to. We want to. One of the other men, a grizzled worker named Frank, stepped forward. You fed us decent meals for the first time in years. Figure we owe you. This is more than... It's not charity, Maddox cut in. It's common sense. You need this place looking good. We make it look good. Simple as that. So they worked. The men fixed the window, reinforced the floors, patched holes in the walls. Bessie scrubbed every surface until her hands were raw. Ruth organized the children's belongings, making the cramped space look intentional instead of desperate. The twins hauled water and firewood without complaint for once. By day 3, the cabin looked different. Not fancy, but solid. Clean, cared for. Better, Maddox said, surveying their work. But we're not done. What else? He pointed to the main ranch kitchen. That inspector sees where you work, where the kids spend time after school. Needs to be spotless. It's already clean. Clean and spotless aren't the same thing. He was right. Bessie spent the next 2 days organizing the kitchen with military precision. Every pot in its place. every surface gleaming, supplies inventoried and labeled. She even scrubbed the ceiling beams. James helped, standing on a stool to reach high shelves. Why does everything have to be so perfect? Because a man is coming to decide if I'm good enough to keep my family. That's stupid. Maybe, but it's how things work. James was quiet for a moment, concentrating on wiping down a shelf. My papa says you're the best cook we've ever had. That's nice of him. He says other stuff too. Like what? The boy's ears went red. That you're brave and strong, and that the ranch is better with you here. Bessie stopped scrubbing. He said all that? Yeah. When he thought I wasn't listening, James climbed down from the stool. I think so too. The better part, I mean. After he left, Bessie stood in the quiet kitchen and let herself feel it. This strange new life where people cared whether she stayed or left, where her presence mattered beyond just having meals ready on time. That night, Ruth found her sitting outside the cabin, staring at nothing. You're worried about the investigator. I'm terrified of the investigator. Ruth sat down beside her. What if we mess up? What if one of us says something wrong? Then we deal with it. Bessie looked at her daughter. But you won't mess up. None of you will. You just tell the truth. What if the truth isn't good enough? It was the question Bessie had been avoiding. What if everything they'd built here, the clean cabin, the good meals, the children thriving in school, what if it still wasn't enough for a judge who'd already decided she was unfit? Then we fight harder, she said finally. We keep fighting until there's nothing left to fight with. And if we lose? Bessie pulled Ruth close. We're not going to lose. But she didn't know if she believed it. The day before the investigator arrived, Dorothy Hale showed up at the ranch. Bessie was in the kitchen when she heard the commotion outside. Raised voices, the sound of a wagon. She wiped her hands and went to see what was happening. Dorothy stood in the ranch yard dressed like she was attending a society function, talking to Maddox. Or rather, talking at him while he stood with crossed arms and a hard expression. Simply concerned about the welfare of those poor children, Dorothy was saying as Bessie approached. Surely you understand, Mr. Maddox, an investigator coming all the way from Philadelphia, questions being raised about the suitability of this environment. Mrs. Hale. Maddox's voice was cold. Unless you have ranch business, I'll ask you to leave. I'm not here about ranch business. I'm here about basic human decency. Dorothy's eyes landed on Bessie. Ah, Mrs. Calloway, perhaps you can explain to Mr. Maddox why the whole town is concerned about your situation. The whole town, Bessie said evenly, or just you? I speak for many people who are too polite to say what needs saying. Then say it. I'm tired of dancing around whatever your problem is with me. Dorothy's smile was sharp. My problem is that you've brought scandal and chaos to a quiet community. You show up out of nowhere with 4 children and no husband, take a job meant for a respectable woman, and now we have court investigators and custody hearings disrupting the peace. I didn't disrupt anything. I came here to work. You came here to hide. Dorothy stepped closer. And now your past is catching up with you, and you expect this town to support you? To vouch for you to some investigator? Why should we? Because it's the right thing to do? The right thing, Dorothy laughed, would have been staying with your husband and working out your problems like an adult instead of running away like a child. Bessie felt rage building in her chest. You don't know anything about my marriage. I know you abandoned it. I know you took children from their father without his consent. I know that in any civilized society, that's called kidnapping. Mrs. Hale, Maddox's voice cut between them like a blade. You need to leave, now. I'm not finished. Yes, you are. This is my property. Bessie works for me. And if you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me directly instead of harassing my employees. Dorothy's face flushed. You're making a mistake, Mr. Maddox. When that investigator sees what kind of environment these children are being raised in, rough men, improper supervision, a mother too busy working to raise them properly. The investigator will see 4 healthy, happy children and a mother who's doing everything right. Maddox took a step forward. Now get off my ranch before I have you removed. They stared at each other. Then Dorothy gathered her skirts and climbed back into her wagon. This isn't over, Mrs. Calloway, she called as the driver turned the horses. That investigator will hear the truth about you one way or another. The wagon pulled away, leaving dust and tension in its wake. Bessie realized she was shaking. She's going to sabotage me. She's going to tell the investigator. Let her tell him whatever she wants. Maddox turned to face her. The truth is stronger than her gossip. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, her gossip has a lot more power than my truth. Then we make sure the investigator sees the real story, not Dorothy's version. Miguel appeared from the barn. Everything okay, boss? Fine. Just Dorothy Hale making noise. Maddox looked at Bessie. You all right? No, but I will be. She went back to the kitchen, channeling her anger into work. By dinner time, she'd baked enough bread for 3 days and made a stew that could have fed twice the usual number of men. The ranch hands noticed. You trying to spoil us? One of them joked. Just cooking. Well, keep it up. This is the best meal we've had all month. After dinner, Frank stayed behind while the others left. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. Ma'am, about what happened earlier, with that Hale woman. What about it? Some of us were talking. If that investigator wants to know about you, about how you run things here, we'll tell him. The truth of it. Bessie looked at this weathered man who probably hadn't thought twice about her when she first arrived. Why would you do that? Because you're good people. And because Dorothy Hale's been running this town like her personal kingdom for too long. Time somebody stood up to her. I'm not trying to stand up to anyone. I just want to keep my children. Sometimes those are the same thing. He nodded once and left. That night, Bessie couldn't sleep. She walked the ranch grounds in the darkness, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Tomorrow the investigator would arrive. Tomorrow everything she'd built could fall apart. She found herself at the barn. Inside, one of the horses nickered softly. She slipped through the door, let her eyes adjust to the dimness. Couldn't sleep either? She jumped. Maddox was sitting on a hay bale, a bottle beside him. Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. It's fine. She sat down nearby, leaving space between them. Why are you out here? Thinking. About? He took a drink, offered her the bottle. She took it, felt whiskey burn down her throat, handed it back. About how much has changed since you got here, he said. The ranch runs smoother. The men are happier. James is... His voice caught. James is coming back to life. That's not because of me. It's exactly because of you. He turned to look at her. You know what I see when I look at you? A woman making a mess of everything? Someone who refuses to quit. No matter what gets thrown at her, you keep going. That's rare. Bessie laughed bitterly. I don't feel like I'm refusing to quit. I feel like I'm barely holding on. Same thing most days. They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the valley. What if the investigator sides with Harold? Bessie asked quietly. Then we appeal, fight it in court, whatever it takes. We. You keep saying we. Maddox met her eyes. Because it's not just your fight anymore. Something passed between them. Understanding, connection, something unnamed that made Bessie's chest tight. She looked away first. I should get back. Tomorrow's going to be long. Bessie. He stood when she did. Whatever happens tomorrow, you've already proven yourself. To me, to the men, to this ranch. Don't let some investigator from back east tell you different. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and left before she could say something she wasn't ready to say. Thomas Graves arrived at 11 the next morning in a rented buggy, wearing a brown suit and carrying a leather satchel. He was younger than Bessie expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes that took in everything at once. Mrs. Calloway, I'm Thomas Graves, court investigator. He didn't offer his hand. I'll need to see the children's living quarters, interview each child separately, and speak with you and your employer. Of course. Would you like some coffee first, something to eat? I'd like to get started if you don't mind. Cold. Professional. Impossible to read. Bessie showed him to the cabin first. She'd cleaned it that morning until every surface gleamed, but now she saw it through his eyes. Small, cramped, the furniture mismatched and worn. Graves walked through slowly, making notes. 2 rooms for 5 people. The children share 1 room. I have the other. 4 children in 1 room. They don't mind. It's more space than we had in Philadelphia. He wrote something, moved to the window, tested the latch, checked the stove, the water bucket, the beds. Where do the children study? At the table, or in the main kitchen after school. And when you're working, Ruth watches them. She's responsible. More notes. Bessie wanted to scream at him to say something, to give her some indication of what he was thinking. I'd like to see where you work now. The kitchen looked perfect. Bessie had made sure of it. Everything organized, spotless, the scent of fresh bread filling the air. Graves examined it all, opened cupboards, checked the stove temperature, ran a finger along the counters looking for dust. You feed 40 men 3 meals a day? Yes. And manage childcare simultaneously? The children are in school most of the day. After school, they help in the kitchen or do homework. So they work. They help. There's a difference. Is there? He looked at her directly. Mrs. Calloway, I've read the reports from Philadelphia. Your husband claims you forced the children into labor to support your employment here. That's not true. They help because families help each other. They're not being exploited. That's your perspective. I need to hear theirs. The children were waiting in the main house. Graves interviewed each one separately, starting with Ruth. Bessie wasn't allowed to be present. She paced outside, trying not to imagine what they were saying, what questions he was asking, how he was twisting their words. After Ruth came Grace, her small face serious as she went into the room. Bessie wanted to grab her, hold her, tell her what to say. But she couldn't. She could only wait. The twins went in together at their request. They were in there for 20 minutes that felt like hours. Finally, Graves emerged. I'd like to speak with Mr. Maddox now. He's in the south pasture. I can send someone. I'll find him myself. I'd like to see the ranch operations firsthand. He left. Bessie stood frozen until the children came running. Mama, he asked so many questions, Grace said, clinging to her. What kind of questions? About our room, about school, about if we're happy. Grace looked up at her. I told him we are. I told him we like it here. Ruth was pale. He asked about Father, about why we left. Bessie's heart stopped. What did you tell him? The truth. That Father scared me sometimes, that you protected us. Ruth's voice dropped. Was that wrong? No, honey, the truth is never wrong. But even as she said it, Bessie wondered if that was true. Sometimes the truth got twisted into something ugly by people who wanted it to be. Graves returned 2 hours later with Maddox. The investigator's expression gave nothing away. Mrs. Calloway, I have what I need for my preliminary report. I'll be staying in town tonight and conducting some additional interviews tomorrow before I return to Philadelphia. Additional interviews? With community members, the school teacher, local business owners, anyone who can speak to your character and the children's well-being. Dorothy. He was going to interview Dorothy. Of course, Bessie said, keeping her voice steady. Whatever you need. After Graves left, Maddox found her in the kitchen. He asked hard questions. What did you tell him? That you're the best cook this ranch has seen, that you work harder than anyone I know, that your children are well cared for and thriving. Maddox paused. And that if the court takes them from you, it'll be the worst injustice I've seen in 40 years. You said that? I meant it. Bessie turned away before he could see her cry. What if it's not enough? Then we make it enough. That night was the longest of Bessie's life. She lay awake imagining Graves interviewing Dorothy, hearing all the poison that woman had been saving up, imagining the report he'd write, the recommendations he'd make. Morning came gray and cold. Bessie made breakfast mechanically, going through motions while her mind spun. The children went to school. The ranch hands ate and left. The day crawled forward. At noon, Mrs. Fletcher appeared at the ranch in her Sunday dress. Mrs. Calloway, I wanted you to know the investigator came to the school this morning. He asked about your children. Bessie's stomach dropped. What did you tell him? The truth. That Ruth is one of my best students, that the twins are bright when they apply themselves, that Grace is reading above her grade level and brings joy to the classroom. Mrs. Fletcher's expression softened. I also told him that in my 15 years of teaching, I've rarely seen children so devoted to their mother. Whatever happened in Philadelphia, whatever brought you here, those children love you. That was obvious. Thank you. I also told him that Dorothy Hale's opinion should be taken with a grain of salt, as she has a personal vendetta. Mrs. Fletcher smiled slightly. I don't know if he listened, but I said it anyway. After she left, Miguel found Bessie sitting on the cabin steps. The investigator, he is gone? Back to Philadelphia, to write his report. Then you wait. Then I wait. Miguel sat beside her. My mother, she used to say that sometimes the hardest part of fighting is the time between punches, when you can only stand there and hope you hit hard enough. Your mother was a smart woman. She was, and she would have liked you, I think. He stood. You hit hard enough, Senora. Now you wait to see if they stay down. The days blurred together. Bessie cooked, cleaned, tried to keep busy. The children asked questions she couldn't answer. When will we know? What if he says we have to go back? What happens then? I don't know, she told them honestly. We just have to wait. 2 weeks after Graves left, Preston sent word. The investigator's report had been filed. The judge would review it and issue a ruling within 10 days. 10 more days of not knowing. Bessie threw herself into work, cooked elaborate meals, scrubbed surfaces that were already clean, anything to keep her hands and mind occupied. On day 7, Harold sent a telegram. Confident and favorable ruling. Stop. Prepare to return children. Stop. She burned it in the stove and tried not to think about what would happen if he was right. On day 9, she couldn't take it anymore. She rode into town with Maddox, found Preston in his office. Have you heard anything? Nothing yet. The judge hasn't. He stopped as his clerk rushed in with a telegram. Preston read it, his expression carefully neutral. Then he looked at Bessie. The ruling came through. Her heart stopped. And? The judge wants to see you, in person. There's a hearing scheduled for tomorrow in Philadelphia. Tomorrow? I can't. That's not enough time. The telegram says you can participate by proxy if travel is impossible. I can represent you. Bessie thought about letting Preston speak for her, about staying safe in Montana while someone else fought her battle. Then she thought about her children. No, I'll go. I need to be there. The train left in 3 hours. Bessie had 2 hours to pack, to tell the children, to prepare for whatever was coming. Ruth helped her pack with shaking hands. What does it mean? That he wants to see you? I don't know. Is it good or bad? I don't know, honey. The twins were quiet for once. Grace was crying. Bessie held each of them, promised she'd come back, tried to believe it herself. Maddox drove her to the station. They didn't talk much. What was there to say? At the platform, he grabbed her hand. Bessie. She looked at him. You're stronger than you think. Don't let them make you forget that. The train came. She boarded without looking back, afraid if she did, she'd lose her nerve. Philadelphia appeared too soon. The courthouse loomed gray and imposing. Bessie walked in wearing the same dress as last time, carrying the same fear. Preston met her in the hallway. The judge read Graves' report. He has questions. What kind of questions? The kind that could go either way. They entered the courtroom. Harold was already there with Whitmore, both looking confident. Too confident. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Mrs. Calloway, thank you for making the trip on short notice. Of course, Your Honor. I've reviewed Mr. Graves' report thoroughly. It's detailed and, frankly, presents a more complex picture than I expected. He looked at her over his glasses. He reports that your children appear healthy, educated, and well-adjusted. That your living quarters, while modest, are adequate. That your employer speaks highly of your work ethic and character. Bessie's heart lifted slightly. However, the judge continued, he also notes concerns. The children work in the kitchen regularly. They live in close quarters with 40 ranch hands. And there are questions about the sustainability of this arrangement, whether you can maintain employment while properly supervising 4 children. Your Honor, if I may, Preston started. The judge held up his hand. I'm not finished. Mr. Graves also interviewed several community members. Most spoke positively about Mrs. Calloway and her children. But one, a Mrs. Dorothy Hale, raised significant concerns about Mrs. Calloway's character and fitness. Of course she did. Your Honor, Bessie said, her voice stronger than she felt, Mrs. Hale has had a vendetta against me since I arrived in Silver Creek. Nothing I've done has been good enough for her because she decided from day one that I didn't belong. Her opinion isn't based on facts, it's based on prejudice. That may be true, but her concerns mirror some of my own. The judge set down the report. Mrs. Calloway, I'm not questioning your love for your children. That's evident. What I question is your judgment. You uprooted them suddenly, took them across the country, put them in a situation that, while currently stable, could change at any moment. What happens if you lose your job? What's your backup plan? I won't lose my job. You can't guarantee that. No, but I can guarantee that I'll do whatever it takes to keep my children safe and cared for. That's more than their father ever guaranteed. Harold stood. Your Honor, this is exactly the kind of emotional outburst that demonstrates— Sit down, Mr. Calloway. The judge's tone was sharp. You've had your say. Now I'm listening to your wife. Ex-wife, Bessie wanted to say, but she held her tongue. The judge looked at her directly. Mrs. Calloway, tell me why I should rule in your favor. Not legal arguments, just the truth. Why are you the better parent? The question hung in the air. Bessie thought about everything she'd been through. The years of making herself small, the fear that had lived in her bones. The moment she'd decided enough was enough and walked away from a life that was killing her slowly. Because I see them, she said quietly. I know that Ruth pretends to be tough, but cries at night when she thinks no one can hear. I know that Daniel is scared of loud noises because of his father's temper. I know that Samuel acts out because he doesn't know how else to get attention. And I know that Grace stopped talking for 2 months after watching her father hit me. Harold's face went white. Whitmore started to object. I'm not finished, Bessie said, her voice rising. I know what they're afraid of, what makes them laugh, what they dream about. I know because I'm there, every day. Not because it's convenient or looks good, because they're mine and I'm theirs and we belong together. That's why you should rule in my favor. Because Harold might be able to provide a bigger house and better opportunities, but I can provide something he never has, a mother who actually loves them more than she loves herself. The courtroom was silent. The judge sat back in his chair, looked at the papers in front of him, looked at Harold, then at Bessie. Mr. Calloway, do you have anything to add? Harold stood slowly. Your Honor, my ex-wife, is very emotional, but emotion isn't enough to raise children. They need stability, education, opportunities that only I can provide. Did you hit her? The judge interrupted. What? Did you hit Mrs. Calloway as she just described? Harold's lawyer jumped in. Your Honor, there's no evidence. I'm asking Mr. Calloway. Everyone waited. Harold's jaw tightened. There were incidents, arguments that got heated, but nothing that warranted yes or no. A pause. Yes, but she's exaggerating the severity. And did your daughter witness this violence? Another pause. Possibly. The judge's expression hardened. Possibly. He looked down at the report again, then at the children's statements that were part of the file. Finally, he looked at both parents. I'm ready to make my ruling. Bessie's hands gripped the table so hard her knuckles went white. Mr. Calloway, while you can provide material advantages, Mr. Graves' report and this hearing have raised serious concerns about your fitness as a custodial parent. Your admission of domestic violence, combined with the children's own statements about feeling unsafe in your presence, weighs heavily against you. Harold started to speak. The judge cut him off. Mrs. Calloway, while your methods have been unconventional and your situation is not ideal, the evidence shows that your children are thriving under your care. They're healthy, educated, and most importantly, they feel safe. Bessie couldn't breathe. Therefore, I'm granting you full custody of all 4 children. The words didn't register at first. Then they hit like a wave. Full custody. Mr. Calloway, you may request supervised visitation through the court, but you will not attempt to contact the children or Mrs. Calloway directly. Any violation of this order will result in contempt charges. Do you understand? Harold's face was red with rage. This is ridiculous. You're giving my children to a woman who kidnapped them. She didn't kidnap them. She removed them from a dangerous situation. There's a difference. The judge gathered his papers. My ruling stands. Court is adjourned. Bessie sat frozen as people moved around her. Preston was talking, smiling, saying something about appeals and final paperwork, but she couldn't hear him over the roaring in her ears. She'd won. Her children were hers. Harold stormed out with Whitmore, both of them furious. Bessie didn't care. Let them be angry. Let them appeal. She had her children. Outside the courthouse, she stood in the cold Philadelphia air and finally let herself cry. Not from fear this time, from relief so overwhelming it felt like drowning. Preston found her there. Mrs. Calloway, are you all right? I won. You did. I can't believe it. I thought, I know, but you fought hard and you won. He handed her an envelope. Final custody papers. Keep them somewhere safe. She clutched the envelope like it might disappear. Thank you for everything. You did this yourself. I just helped with the paperwork. The train back to Montana left that evening. Bessie rode through the night, unable to sleep, unable to stop smiling even as tears kept falling. She'd done it. Against every odd, every expectation, every person who'd said she couldn't, she'd done it. The ranch appeared at dawn, golden in the early light. Maddox was waiting at the station with all 4 children. The moment Bessie stepped off the train, Grace broke free and ran to her. Then the twins. Then Ruth, trying to stay dignified but failing. They crashed into her all at once, talking over each other, crying and laughing. We won, Bessie said, pulling them close. You're mine, all of you, forever. Really? Grace looked up with wet eyes. Father can't take us back? Never, I promise. Ruth buried her face in Bessie's shoulder and sobbed, all the fear and anger and relief finally breaking free. Over their heads, Bessie met Maddox's eyes. He smiled, really smiled, and she saw something there that made her chest tight for entirely different reasons. But that was for later. Right now, she just held her children and let herself believe that maybe, finally, they were safe. The ranch felt different after the hearing. Not in any way Bessie could point to exactly. The buildings were the same. The work was the same. The mountains still rose up against the sky like they'd been there forever. But something had shifted. The fear that had lived in her chest for months, the constant waiting for everything to fall apart, had finally loosened its grip. She woke up the morning after returning and realized she'd slept through the night for the first time since leaving Philadelphia. The children felt it too. Grace stopped asking when they'd have to leave. The twins fought less, laughed more. Even Ruth's anger seemed to drain away, replaced by something quieter. Not happiness exactly. Her daughter had been through too much for easy happiness, but maybe the beginning of peace. That first week back, Bessie cooked like she was celebrating. Roasts that made the ranch hands groan with appreciation. Pies that disappeared before they'd cooled. Bread that filled the kitchen with warmth and made James appear in the doorway every afternoon like clockwork. You're in a good mood, Miguel observed, watching her hum while she kneaded dough. I won. I'm allowed to be in a good mood. You are. It's good to see. He paused. The boss, he's been in a good mood too. Has he? Whistling while he works. Haven't heard him whistle in years. Bessie kept her eyes on the dough. Maybe he's just happy the ranch is running smooth. Maybe. Miguel's tone suggested he didn't believe that for a second. Or maybe it's something else. She didn't take the bait. But later, when Maddox came by the kitchen to discuss next week's supplies, she found herself noticing things she'd been too scared to notice before. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. How he always found reasons to linger after their conversations ended. The careful distance he maintained, like he was afraid of stepping too close. Bessie? He was staring at her. Did you hear what I said? Sorry. What? I said we need to increase the flour order. You're going through it faster than usual. Right, yes. More flour. He studied her face. You sure you're all right? You've been distracted all week. I'm fine. Just adjusting to everything. To not running anymore? The question caught her off guard. Something like that. Takes time. Getting used to standing still after you've been moving so long. He shifted his weight. But you'll get there. After he left, Bessie stood in the empty kitchen and thought about what he'd said, standing still. She'd been running for so long, from Harold, from the judge, from her own fear, that she didn't know how to just exist without looking over her shoulder. Maybe it was time to learn. That Sunday, Mrs. Fletcher invited the children to a church social. Ruth looked at Bessie with uncertainty. Do we have to go? Of course not. But it might be nice. Meet some other kids. What if people are mean? What if they know about the hearing and father and everything? Bessie knelt down to Ruth's level. Then you hold your head up and remember that none of it is your fault. None of it is shameful. We survived something hard and we're still here. That's nothing to be ashamed of. Ruth considered this. Will you come with us? If you want me to. I want you to. So Bessie went to the church social, wearing her best dress and feeling like an imposter among these people who'd lived in Silver Creek their whole lives. But the children ran off to play with the others, and Mrs. Fletcher introduced Bessie to the other women, and nobody asked prying questions. Nobody except Dorothy Hale. She appeared like a storm cloud, face pinched with disapproval. Mrs. Calloway, I'm surprised to see you here. Why's that? I assumed after your legal troubles, you'd prefer to keep a low profile. Bessie met her eyes. I have nothing to hide. Don't you? Dorothy's smile was sharp. I heard about the judge's ruling. Quite surprising given the circumstances. What circumstances? A woman who abandoned her marriage, dragged her children across the country, forced them into manual labor, and still the judge ruled in her favor. Makes one wonder what wasn't said in that courtroom. Mrs. Hale, Bessie's voice was quiet but firm. I'm going to say this once. I left my husband because he hurt me. I brought my children here because it was the only safe place I could reach, and I won custody because the judge saw the truth, that my children are better off with me than with a man who terrorized them. Now, you can believe what you want, spread whatever gossip makes you feel important, but I'm done caring what you think. She walked away before Dorothy could respond, heart pounding but head high. Mrs. Fletcher caught up to her near the refreshment table. I heard that. I probably shouldn't have. No, you absolutely should have. Dorothy's needed someone to stand up to her for 20 years. The schoolteacher smiled. Welcome to Silver Creek, Mrs. Calloway. Really welcome, I mean. The words settled into Bessie like warmth. For the first time since arriving in Montana, she felt like maybe she could belong here. Not because everyone accepted her, Dorothy and her friends would probably always see her as an outsider, but because the people who mattered had decided she was worth standing beside. That was enough. The weeks rolled into months. Summer came to Montana with heat that made the kitchen unbearable and sunlight that lasted until 9 at night. The children grew brown from playing outside, their Philadelphia pallor replaced by health and sun. Grace learned to ride a horse with Daniel teaching her. Samuel discovered he had a talent for fixing things and spent his afternoons helping the ranch hands with repairs. Ruth found a best friend in Mrs. Fletcher's niece and filled notebooks with stories she wouldn't show anyone. And Bessie cooked. Every day, 3 meals, 40 men plus her children, and increasingly James, who'd claim permanent residency at the kitchen table. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, the seasons of cattle and crops, the way Montana weather could change in an hour. She learned other things too, like how Maddox took his coffee, black with 1 sugar, how his face softened when he watched James laugh. The way he'd started appearing at the kitchen earlier each morning, making excuses about needing to discuss ranch business, but really just wanting to be near her. She noticed because she was doing the same thing, finding reasons to walk past the barn when she knew he'd be there, keeping extra biscuits aside for him, learning his schedule like she'd memorized her children's. Miguel noticed. You two are ridiculous. What are you talking about? You and the boss, dancing around each other like scared teenagers. We're not dancing around anything. We work together, that's all. Sure. And I'm the king of Spain. He grinned. Senora, I've known Cole Maddox for 15 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. He's just being kind. He's in love with you. Bessie stopped mid-stir. Don't be ridiculous. Why is that ridiculous? You're beautiful, strong. You make his son happy. Why wouldn't he love you? Because I'm a mess. Because I just escaped 1 marriage. Because... She set down her spoon. Because I don't know how to do this. Do what? Let someone get close. Let myself want something beyond just surviving. Miguel's expression gentled. Maybe that's exactly what you need to learn. That night, Bessie couldn't sleep. She sat on the cabin porch, watching the stars and thinking about everything Miguel had said. About Maddox and the way her chest tightened when he smiled. About how terrified she was of wanting something and losing it. Can't sleep? She jumped. Maddox stood at the edge of the porch, hands in his pockets. Seems to be going around, she said. He climbed the steps, sat beside her. Close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, but not touching. Never touching, though lately she'd wondered what would happen if that changed. I've been thinking, he said. About? About how things have changed since you got here. How much better everything is. The ranch is running well. I'm not talking about the ranch. He looked at her. Bessie, He stopped, started again. I need to tell you something. Her heart was racing. Okay. When Sarah died, my wife, I thought that was it for me. Thought I'd just work the ranch and raise James and that would be enough. And it was, for a while. But then you showed up with your kids and your fear and your determination to make things work, and everything changed. Cole, let me finish. Let me, please. He took a breath. You made this place feel like a home again, instead of just somewhere I existed. You brought light back into my son's life, and his voice roughened. You made me remember what it felt like to want something beyond the next day's work. Bessie couldn't breathe. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you. I've probably loved you since you helped fight that bunkhouse fire. But I definitely loved you when you stood up to Dorothy Hale. And I absolutely loved you when you came back from Philadelphia with that look on your face like you'd conquered the world. He turned to face her fully. I love you, Bessie. And I need to know if there's any chance you might feel the same way. The words hung between them in the Montana night. Bessie thought about Harold, about 10 years of making herself small and silent, about the fear that still lived in her bones sometimes, about how easy it would be to push Maddox away, to protect herself from the possibility of being hurt again. Then she thought about Grace's laughter, about Ruth's stories, about the twins' constant noise and James's quiet presence, about the life she'd built here, the person she was becoming, about how Maddox had never asked her to be anything but herself. I'm terrified, she said quietly. Of what? Of wanting this, of letting myself hope, of, her voice cracked, of it all falling apart. It might. He was honest enough not to lie. Things fall apart sometimes. But Bessie, they also come together. They grow, they get better. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. I'm not Harold. I won't hurt you. And I'll wait as long as you need to believe that. She looked at their joined hands, felt the calluses on his palm, the warmth of his skin, felt something in her chest crack open. I don't want you to wait, she said. No? No, she met his eyes. I'm still terrified, but I think I love you too. He smiled then, really smiled, and pulled her close. Bessie let herself lean into him, let herself feel safe in someone's arms for the first time in longer than she could remember. They sat there as the stars wheeled overhead, not talking, just being together. And Bessie thought that maybe, finally, she could stop running, could plant roots in this Montana soil and let herself grow. The next morning, James appeared in the kitchen earlier than usual. Papa says you're his girlfriend now. Bessie nearly dropped the egg she was cracking. He said what? That you're his girlfriend, are you? She looked at the boy's hopeful face. Would that be okay with you? James considered this seriously. Will you still make me biscuits? Of course. And can Grace still be my friend? Always? Then yes, it's okay. He climbed onto his usual stool. Mama would have liked you. The words hit Bessie square in the chest. You think so? She liked people who were kind. You're kind. He swung his legs. And Papa's happy now. He wasn't happy before. Grace wandered in, still rubbing sleep from her eyes. Who's happy? James is Papa, Bessie said. Because we're all happy. I'm happy, Grace agreed. Are we staying here forever now? Forever. The word used to terrify Bessie, Now it felt like a promise. Yeah, baby, we're staying. The children took the news about Bessie and Maddox with varying degrees of interest. Grace thought it was romantic. The twins mostly cared about whether they could keep using the barn whenever they wanted. Ruth was quiet about it, processing in that careful way she had. Later, Bessie found her daughter sitting by the creek. You okay with this? With Cole and me? Ruth threw a pebble into the water. Are you happy? I think so, yes. Then I'm okay with it. She threw another pebble. He's not like father. No, he's not. And he makes you smile, really smile, not the fake one you used to do. Ruth looked at her. I want you to be happy, Mama. We all do. Bessie pulled her daughter close. When did you get so grown up? When I had to be. It wasn't the answer Bessie wanted, but it was honest. Her children had grown up too fast, had seen too much. But they were also stronger for it, in their own ways. That had to count for something. Summer faded into fall. The leaves turned gold and the air got crisp, and Bessie learned what Montana winters looked like. Snow that came early and stayed late, temperatures that made Philadelphia cold seem like a joke. But the kitchen stayed warm. And every night, after the children were asleep and the ranch was quiet, Maddox would find his way to her porch, and they'd sit together, talking about everything and nothing. Slowly, carefully, Bessie let herself trust it. Let herself believe that this man meant what he said, that his kindness wasn't a trap, that she was allowed to want something without it being taken away. One night in October, he asked her to marry him. They were in the barn. She'd gone to find him about a supply issue and found him fixing a stall door. He'd looked at her in the lamplight and just said it. Marry me. Bessie froze. What? Marry me. Make this official. Let me be a father to your kids and let you be a mother to James, and let's build something together. He set down his tools. I know it's fast. I know you might not be ready, but I'm sure, Bessie. I've never been more sure of anything. She thought about marriage, about what it had meant with Harold, ownership, control, fear, about what it could mean with someone who actually saw her. I don't want to lose myself again, she said quietly. You won't. I don't want to change you, Bessie. I love who you are. He stepped closer. And I promise you, every day for the rest of our lives, I will never make you feel small or scared or less than what you are. What if I mess it up? Then we fix it together. What if, Bessie? He took her hands. What if it works? What if we build something good and strong and real? What if we're happy? What if they were happy? The possibility felt almost too big to hold. Ask me again, she said. What? Ask me again. Let me hear it one more time. He smiled. Bessie Calloway, will you marry me? Yes. They married in November as the first snow fell. Nothing fancy, just Preston as witness, the children, a few ranch hands, and Mrs. Fletcher who cried through the whole thing. They exchanged vows in the ranch house parlor with James holding the rings and Grace scattering wildflowers from the summer that she'd pressed and saved. Bessie wore a blue dress that Ruth had helped her pick out. Maddox wore his best suit and couldn't stop smiling. When he kissed her, their first real kiss, the children cheered and the ranch hands applauded, and Bessie felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real hope. Not the desperate kind she'd been running on. The kind that said tomorrow would be good, and the day after that would be good, and maybe, finally, she could stop waiting for everything to fall apart. That night, after the celebration and the food and the children finally falling asleep, Bessie and Maddox, Cole, she could call him Cole now, sat on the porch of what was now their house. How do you feel? He asked. Terrified. Still? Probably always. She leaned against him. But also happy. Is it possible to be both? I think that's just called being human. She laughed. When did you get so wise? About 40 years ago? You're just now noticing. They sat in comfortable silence. Inside, Bessie could hear the children settling down, all 5 of them now, hers and his becoming theirs. A family built not from obligation but from choice. Cole? Thank you. For what? For seeing me, for believing me. For... Her voice caught. For everything. He kissed the top of her head. Thank you for saying yes. Winter came hard that year. Snow piled up until the ranch felt isolated from the world, just them and the mountains and the work that never stopped. But the kitchen stayed warm and full of children and noise and life. Bessie learned what it meant to be a wife when the word didn't come with fear attached. Learned that she could disagree with Cole and he wouldn't rage. That she could be tired or frustrated or messy and he'd still love her. That marriage could be partnership instead of prison. She learned other things too, like how to let Ruth help without feeling like she was failing, how to set boundaries with the twins while still letting them be wild, how to balance Grace's neediness with everyone else's needs, how to be a mother to James without trying to replace what he'd lost. It wasn't always smooth. Some days the children fought, and the work was too much, and Bessie felt the old panic rising. But she was learning to breathe through it, to ask for help, to trust that bad days didn't mean everything was falling apart. And slowly, the fear that had lived in her chest for so long started to quiet. Dorothy Hale never quite forgave her for existing, but eventually she stopped actively trying to sabotage her, which Bessie counted as a win. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Some people would never change their minds. That was okay. Bessie didn't need everyone's approval anymore. She had her family. She had work that mattered. She had a husband who loved her without trying to break her. She had enough. Spring came like a promise. The snow melted, the valley turned green, and the ranch burst back into life. Bessie planted a garden behind the house, vegetables and flowers mixed together in happy chaos. Grace helped, getting dirt under her fingernails and joy on her face. "Mama, look!" She held up a tiny green shoot. "It's growing!" "It is, baby. We made it grow." "We did." Grace considered the sprout seriously. "Is this home now? Really home?" Bessie looked around at the ranch, at the mountains, at the life they'd built, thought about how far they'd come from that desperate train ride, from the fear and uncertainty. "Yeah," she said, "this is home." 1 year after arriving in Montana, Bessie stood in her kitchen making breakfast for her family. Through the window, she could see Cole working with the twins in the barn. Ruth was at the table doing homework while James drew pictures beside her. Grace was singing some made-up song while she set out plates. Normal, chaotic, loud, perfect in its imperfection. Miguel came in for his morning coffee. "Big day today, Senora." "Is it?" "1 year since you arrived." He poured himself a cup. "You've come far." Bessie thought about the woman who'd stepped off the train a year ago, desperate, terrified, holding on by her fingernails. That woman felt like a stranger now, or maybe not a stranger, just someone she used to be, someone she'd grown from. "We all have," she said. "You ever regret it, coming here?" "Not once. Not even when Dorothy Hale is being difficult?" "Not even then." Bessie smiled. "This place saved us. All of us." "Nah." Miguel headed for the door. "You saved yourselves. This place just gave you somewhere safe to do it." After he left, Bessie stood alone in the quiet kitchen, thought about everything that had happened, everything she'd survived, the fear and the fighting and the moments she'd wanted to give up. And she thought about what came after, the hope, the healing, the slow building of something real and strong. She'd come to Montana running from her past, but she'd found her future here instead. Cole came in smelling like hay and horses, kissed her cheek. "Morning, wife." "Morning, husband. You know what today is? 1 year. 1 year since you showed up and turned my whole life upside down." He pulled her close. "Best thing that ever happened to me." "Second best?" Bessie corrected. "James was first." "Fair." He held her a moment longer. "Happy?" It was a question he asked sometimes, like he needed to make sure, like he was still amazed she'd said yes. "Happy," she confirmed. And she was. Not in the simple, easy way of fairy tales, but in the complicated, messy, real way of actual life. Happy with setbacks and struggles mixed in. Happy with fear that still surfaced sometimes. Happy with imperfect children and hard work and a husband who snored. Just happy. The children crashed into the kitchen demanding breakfast. Grace climbed onto Cole's back. The twins argued about something. Ruth rolled her eyes at all of them. James quietly started helping set the table without being asked. Bessie served breakfast, scrambled eggs and bacon and fresh bread, and watched her family eat and talk and exist together. watched them take up space without fear, without looking over their shoulders. She'd done that. She'd brought them here and fought for them and given them safety. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but she'd done it. Later, after everyone scattered to their various tasks and the kitchen was quiet again, Bessie pulled out the custody papers from their hiding spot. Read through them one more time, letting the reality of it settle. Her children. Legally, permanently, irrevocably hers. She'd started this journey terrified and desperate, with 30 days and nothing to lose. She'd survived inspections and courtrooms and Dorothy Hale's vendetta. She'd learned to cook for 40 men and plant gardens and be a wife to someone who actually deserved it. But more than that, she'd learned to stand still, to stop running, to believe that good things didn't always get taken away. Bessie folded the papers and put them back. She didn't need to look at them anymore. Didn't need the legal proof to know what was true. She'd come to Montana looking for survival. She'd found a life instead. Outside, Grace was laughing at something Cole said. The twins were racing toward the barn. Ruth was reading in the shade of a tree. James was drawing on the porch steps. Her family, her home, her future. Bessie stepped outside into the Montana sunshine, felt the warmth on her face, and knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Not the easy choice, not the safe choice, but the right one. And that was everything.